Don't know about flavor.
Well, that was broke the bank on the graphics on that one. Hi, welcome to another Grain and Grape live brewing demonstration. We brew beer live to camera, and so you can watch it and hopefully learn something. My name's Joel. I spend the show running things from behind the camera, and today we're very lucky to be joined by Dan. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here as usual.
Yeah, well, yeah, I say welcome to the show, but actually I should say welcome back. You are, well, Grain and Grape demonstration royalty, practically, I should say.
I'm certainly part of the old school.
yeah, you've been doing demos for a long time. I would have presented you with a crown, but we broke the budget on the graphics. The opening
That's
sequence
right, just slips off the bald head.
All right, well, it all worked out then. So yeah, you've been obviously before this thing called COVID changed life as we know it. We would do live demonstrations in store most Saturdays, and we did those for years. And you were sort of around since the beginning, really, weren't you? Or
since fairly early. I think the demos were like once a month for quite a while there, and we'd slot in every now and again. So I started doing the demos with Jeff, who you've probably seen doing an online demo before, and we did a team demo for a while, and that was nice. But we sort of split it up, and John decided he wanted to do demos every week. So we spread the demo love around a bit.
Good, yeah. So you and Jeff kind of, I guess, spearheaded that and refined them, and
well,
in a way,
I'd like to think that we took what was, essentially just a person that was, showing a few people in the shop how to make some beer, and sort of refined it into a bit more of a product that could, eventually do something like go on camera and provide a bit of online content for people and spread that demo a bit further around.
Yeah, spread the love. And you also have a day job, which I think our viewers will probably find quite interesting. You work for a rather large brewery. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I work for Carlton United. I'm not here on behalf of them, I'm here on behalf of me. So don't hold it against them and don't hold it against me. I've been at CEB for about 30 years. I've worked in pretty much every area from the warehouse through to the brewing department, which is where I am now. I have been in the brewing department for about 11 years. The majority of that I spent in the actual brew house, converting grains into sugar.
Yeah.
So at work things are quite separated, so there is a whole department devoted to taking grain and turning it into sugary liquid.
Yeah.
Then I pump that across to some other guys in a different department who ferment it into beer.
Yeah, got it.
So our department's broken up into brew house, fermentation and filtration.
Yeah.
So basically I've worked in all three of those areas, but spent the majority of my time in the brew house.
Yeah.
So starch conversion and stuff like that is what I do from a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Well, we were talking before the show, and I just not sure why. I guess I assumed that you had a background in chemistry or science or something, but you were saying that no, you don't need any special qualifications to do what you do.
I started at the brewery because my cousin's boyfriend was an electrician and said, hey, they have summer jobs.
Yeah.
So I went for a summer job 30 years ago and stayed.
There you go.
People on the shop floor aren't qualified brewers. I'm just a shop floor worker. I'm not management. I'm just a brewing assistant by title. But I actually do have brewing qualifications. Yep. So I'm an IBD diploma qualified brewer. But that was something I did for myself, really, not for work.
Yeah.
It helps work, but it's not necessary for what I do.
Yeah. Well, definitely, you're a very knowledgeable home brewer. Every time you come in and do a demo, I think, everyone's very lucky to be in your presence. You certainly know. I've learned but many things off you over the years.
There's not enough bowing.
Well, we'll see if we can work that into the next show. Next time you're in, we'll roll out the carpet for you. Yeah, I just thought that was a bit of something interesting for.
Cool. Yeah, I suppose
people.
it's nice to look down the computer screen and have some confidence that the person you're talking to knows what they're on about.
Yeah.
Which, you know, hopefully I do, or at least more than the average guy off the street.
Yeah. So cool. And today, I guess we won't go too much into it now because you'll explain it as you go along. But I believe you're planning to brew a non-alcoholic beer today, or a low alcoholic beer.
I'm shooting for what would be classified as non-alcoholic, so I'm going for about 0.5% alcohol, which would make it officially non-alcoholic. But I'm not sure. I've not actually used this technique before. We're all doing an experiment together today. I'm learning how to do it. You're watching me learn how to do it. Might fail spectacularly, might work all right.
This is how we like to do it here, by the seat of our pants.
But the object of the game is to brew something down around about 0.5% of alcohol, and hopefully not more than a 1% alcohol beer. It'll kind of be a failure if I go over a percentage point. And I'm using a pretty radical technique to do that. And I'm also going to be using as the title said, my one recipe to rule them all, which is a recipe I've developed that's supposed to be pushed around and nudged and tweaked and shoved in different directions. And this is going to be shoving it about as far in a direction as can possibly be shoved. So we'll just see how versatile it really is.
Cool. Oh, well, like last week, it was last week, Ben brewed his first turbid mash live on camera, so that was also, and that worked out fine.
Well, I reckon I could have done a good job looking at the results of what's happening here. I think turbid is a reasonably good description.
A good description. It is quite turbid in there. So, okay, well, maybe I'll just get out the way and let you get on with the business of brewing. A little bit of business, of course, if anyone has any questions, you've got the chat section to that side of the screen, I think. Dan knows a lot, so feel free to ask your questions if you have any. We may not get onto them all, but we'll see how we go. It all just depends on how the flow goes. Okay, we got a comment that the sound is not syncing very well, so I'll have a look into that. Hopefully it catches up. Yeah, I'll jump behind the camera, see if I could do some technical troubleshooting.
Technical people into that.
Yeah, we'll get there. That's right, the technical monkeys to fix that, and yeah, we'll get on with the show.
Excellent. Right. No worries. All right, so we talked about the one recipe to rule them all and what it's for, so I might just talk about that. Then I'll talk about what I've already done over here and what we're trying to do today and how I'm going to achieve it. Well, hopefully achieve it. The one recipe to rule them all comes from years of doing these demos and talking to other homebrewers. And the advice you're always given by anybody who's done this for a long time, anybody who knows the best way to extract results from a beginning homebrewer, is brew the same thing again and again and again. Pick a nice simple recipe from somebody you trust, brew that thing, brew it again, brew it again, brew it again, until you learn what you're doing. Once you've mastered the basic craft of turning malt into sugar and turning that sugar into booze, then branch out. And everybody says, wow, that's a great idea, and nobody does it because it's as boring as hell. So I was trying to come up with a way to allow people to brew the same recipe over and over and over again, but not have to get the same beer out of it over and over and over again. So I spent a bit of time looking at some of the more popular beers and the common recipe elements and how I could come up with a recipe that basically was a Venn diagram of a whole bunch of different recipes. So take the core of those recipes, make a recipe out of that, and then just allow it to be slightly pushed in all different directions. Hang on a moment, I'll get my piece of paper. So my one recipe to rule them all, the basic recipe is for a relatively gentle, slightly golden amber American pale ale. And I'll tell you what's in it. It's easy. It is 2.25 kilos of pale ale malt, 2.25 kilos of Pilsner malt, 0.25 of a kilo of Crystal 55, or whatever crystal gets you close, 0.25 of a kilo of Munich malt, and 0.25 of a kilo of wheat malt.
Cool. And I'll try and maybe I'll just post that in the comments as well.
All right, cool.
For anyone watching later down the line.
Now the reason behind that is because this gives you, as I said, a golden to light amber wort with a really decently strong malt backbone. That's the basis of a lot of beers. And the way you nudge this around, all right, so I didn't go into hops. Basically, I've kept that nice and simple. It's just 3 additions of Cascade as dry hop, because that's part of the things you nudge. So if you make this beer as an American pale ale, you make it with exactly that grain bill, and you make it with the Cascade hops, and you ferment it with US-05, and it will bang out a nice malty, nice hoppy American pale ale that's nice and simple. But you don't want to brew an American pale ale every time. You want to brew an English pale ale next week. So you take that Pilsner malt and you take it out and you replace it with pale ale malt. So you now don't have a Pilsner edge to your malt. You just got beautiful pale ale. You want it to be English, so make it English pale ale malt. Then leave everything else the same. Sub in EKG instead of Cascade and ferment it with an English yeast. Bingo bango, it's an ESB. I've made it as a Belgian pale ale. It's beautiful. Take out the pale ale malt, replace it with Belgian Pilsner malt, leave everything else the same, ferment it with an Ardennes yeast, use Styrian Goldings as your hops.
So I can see a pattern forming here.
Now it's a Belgian pale ale. You want to make it an IPA instead of an American pale ale? Add in 1 kilogram of pale ale malts and double the hops. That's the idea, is that this thing sits in the middle and can just be slightly shoved in each direction to give you a nice wide variety of beers.
Yeah.
Each bit of the grain bill is there for its reason. Pale ale gives you a good malty background. The Pilsner gives you that little crisp biscuity edge that you get from Pilsner, so that reinforces the malt backbone. Crystal 55 gives you a touch of sweet and caramel. Munich malt gives you an extra layer of slightly different tasting maltiness. And wheat malt gives you a little bit of protein to help your head retention. It's never going to hurt.
Sure.
So put a tiny bit of it in there. And like I said, the hopping bill's deliberately kept simple, so you can play with that all you like. Generally, if I give someone the recipe, I give them a little blurb on the back of how to increase or decrease the gravity, how to change the hopping ratios a little. This will give you, I've made it as 8 different beers so far, and I reckon that you could probably get 20 out of it.
Okay.
Especially if you're into subtle changes. If you're trying to learn how different malt flavours work, make this recipe with just all pale ale malt, no Pilsner malt. Then next time make it with all Pilsner malt, no pale ale malt. And it's going to be the same beer, but it's not going to be the same beer. Use a different brand of Pilsner malt, use a different brand of yeast, use a variety of hops. So, you know, even without that subtle level of variation, it's probably about 20 different beers if you want to use it as a learning tool. It's just a way to brew the same beer every time, because what doesn't change when you nudge it around is you don't change the amount of water, you don't change the mash temperature, you don't change the sparging regimes, you don't change the mash regimes, you don't do any of that. Everything stays the same. The grain bill stays the same quantities, unless you amp it up to an IPA or something. So once you've got it in the mash tun, it all looks the same, and it all behaves the same, and you can just learn your craft physically whilst not getting bored making the same recipe over and over again. That was the reason behind one recipe to rule them all, and it does that job reasonably well. I probably don't expect people would make this every time, but what I suggest to people is you make go on the internet, read Brew Your Own, find an exciting recipe, brew that, then come back and brew one of these. Then go brew an exciting recipe, then come back and brew one of these. It doesn't have to be the same every time, so your beer fridge can be full of different sorts of beers, and you'll refine your craft faster. You'll learn recipe development faster. You'll learn what the different tastes and mouthfeels and qualities of the ingredients are all about. And once you've busted out 6 recipes that you found on the internet and 6 of these, you've got a dozen brews under your belt. Now you know what you're doing already. Go for your life, brew other things.
Yeah.
Doesn't take more than a dozen brews to nail in the basic techniques.
Yeah, for sure.
Whether that be brew in a bag, which is what I generally do for the demos, or whether you're using another system entirely, you're still going to use the same technique over and over again for this recipe. And today, I'm going to push the one recipe to rule them all about as far from the centre as I can push it, because we're going to try and make a basically non-alcoholic beer. The theory behind this non-alcoholic beer is a little different to non-alcoholic beers that are made commercially. So usually there's 2 or 3 different ways that non-alcoholic beers are made commercially. So big brewers will do one of 2 things. They'll make a regular beer, and then they will suck the alcohol out of it. They'll either do that by vacuum distillation. So basically they run it through a big vacuum still, and they just chuck the alcohol away instead of the other bit.
Okay.
Vacuum distillation, because that keeps the temperatures low, it doesn't damage the beer as much as a full distillation would be. The other way big breweries do it is with a reverse osmosis type setup. So they'll use a big ass reverse osmosis thing, push the alcohol through the filter and leave the water and flavour compounds on the other side. It leaves you with a thick, syrupy, almost extracty-like substance, and then they dilute that back, and they tend to then blend it with a very low alcohol beer as well. They might do it a couple of steps. There's a lot of balancing to get the flavours right. It's not just they wang it through the thing and call it non-alcoholic. There's a lot of blending and tweaking involved in that sort of stuff.
So I imagine that process is more involved.
It's very involved, and it's hugely expensive. The equipment, that's why small breweries don't make non-alcoholic beer that way. Because the distillation setup or the reverse osmosis setup is massive. Big enough so that at CUB, I think we're looking at putting one of those in soon, but we haven't got one. We might have one in Queensland. We're making zero alcoholic beer somewhere.
Somewhere.
Not in the brewery I work at. So we've got to have one of them somewhere, but I don't know where it is. We're looking at putting that sort of stuff in because we've got non-alcoholic beer market on one, and we've got the hard seltzer market on the other. Which means that if you suck the alcohol out of something, you've got to do something with it. Might as well make hard seltzer.
Good. Okay. I get it.
So. I've heard talk that we're going to do that sort of stuff, but who knows, it might happen one day.
Yeah, well, the low alcohol, non-alcoholic beer section of the market has exploded, right? That's my understanding?
I've become interested in it because my wife's having a bit of a kick of no booze at the moment. She loves a beer, and she's spending a god-awful fortune on non-alcoholic craft beer. Because it's not cheaper than regular craft beer. So I'm going to work out how to make it and maybe save us some money.
I'm really looking forward, because I'm interested in it as well. I've been getting really into low alcohol, non-alcoholic mixed strength beers. For me, I've got some autoimmune issues, so looking at ways I can have the flavour of a good beer without the alcohol content that's
the way.
I think everyone's sort of for their own reasons getting into this sort of stuff.
I've been using it essentially almost as a sports drink. If I come hot and bothered and I want something to drink, where I would reach for a beer but think, maybe I shouldn't have a beer yet today. I will grab the non-alcoholic beer because it's essentially beer flavoured soft drink. So.
And there's not many. There's a couple of craft breweries. There's
couple of crafts in Australia, a few startups making them now.
I can't remember the name of them, but in Queensland, I think it's Queensland.
Yeah, there's a few. There's a local guys called Upflow are making them.
Okay.
There's a few. I've been drinking a bunch of them, but I won't try to name all the different brands.
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off before. I think you were going to say there was one more.
Yes, we've got two of the commercial techniques for making non-alcoholic beers. Those are the big guys' techniques. The craft brewery technique of favour is to use an unfinished fermentation. So they'll make a quite low strength wort, and then they'll ferment it with a yeast that can't actually ferment all the sugars. So it's a yeast that's been selected because it ferments glucose okay. Sorry, I've got a
oil happening here. Keep an eye on your thing there.
So it ferments glucose okay, it ferments maltose all right, but it doesn't ferment maltotreose and it doesn't ferment the higher sugars at all. So it does a fairly lousy job, basically, of fermenting. Plus, it gives a relatively clean flavour. It's not a sack surf yeast. It's
it's got a long, weird name, doesn't it?
It's a Saccharomyces
something or other.
Something or other. Yeah, but it's not a general sack surf yeast. There's a few yeasts that do that, but most of them pump out odd flavours. This one pumps out a fairly clean beer flavour. So basically, you make a low strength wort, you throw a yeast at it that doesn't do a very good job of fermenting that wort, and then you watch it like a hawk and crush chill it if it looks like it's going too far.
Okay.
That sort of thing. So there's a bit of skill and technique involved in the whole making of the non-alcoholic beer. And of course, they've got to watch themselves, because if they make it 0.6% alcohol, bang, they can't call it non-alcoholic beer anymore.
And then the tax comes in, I guess, and everything else.
So tax is an issue. Being able to call it non-alcoholic is an issue. So they then have to water it back and things like that. So there's a lot of skill and tweaking in all of these non-alcoholic techniques. I'm not doing any of those today. I'm doing a fourth technique, which I basically read about on the internet. If you were to go to Bryce, the malting company's website, or Google Bryce and cold mashing or non-enzymatic mashing.
I'll try and put a link up for that too later down in the track, if anyone watching this later.
So Bryce and Google cold mashing or non-enzymatic mashing, you'll probably hit a link to what I saw, which is a discussion about mashing all the grains in cold water so that we extract the flavours, we extract the proteins, we extract the colours, but it's never warm enough to gelatinise the starch, and it's never warm enough to activate the enzymes to convert the gelatinised starch. Now, the enzymes will work very slowly at cold temperatures, so that's not a guarantee. The main guarantee is the fact that the malt never has its starch gelatinised. So for those of you who know a bit about starch chemistry, basically starch is huge long chains of glucoses, and in grain, essentially they're all scrunched up into a ball. It's a useful imagination tool to think of it like a ball of wool. So it's a big long string of glucose molecules scrunched up into a ball of wool, and any enzymes that want to attack that starch molecule to try and smash it down to sugar molecules can only really get at the outside of that ball of wool. So the vast majority of the starch molecule is inaccessible to them. So you get teensy tiny bits of conversion if you've got enzymes and ungelatinized starch, but not much.
Not enough.
Gelatinisation is the act of adding water to a starch base. It fluffs it up, and then if you take it to the correct temperature, which for the starches in barley is in the late 50s to early 60s stage, the starches, that ball of wool unwinds into the string. So it's kind of like, almost rolling out a ball of wool. It untangles, it unwinds, and suddenly the whole length of that molecule is available for the enzymes
and then they can
break up into sugars.
Yep. And that's Celsius, by the way, for anyone watching in the Fahrenheit.
Degrees Celsius, sorry.
Persuasion, that's fine.
So there's two main enzymes in malt that attack starch molecules. There's alpha amylase and beta amylase. Beta amylase nibbles away at the end of that string. Basically, it comes in from the end of the string and it chomps 2 sugar molecules off, or 2 glucose molecules off, and that gives you a maltose. And it will just chew in until it reaches a branch, because some of these molecules are branched, and then it stops and it can't go any further. The other enzyme is alpha amylase, and it chops the molecules randomly in the middle. I like to sort of think of it as the difference between a chef with a length of spring onions chopping away at the end of it, and he'll chop, chopping little pieces off, or a chef with a pair of cleavers just randomly whacking at that until such times as he chops it into short pieces. Normally those two things work hand in hand. The alpha amylase will whack the molecules into shorter pieces. That gives a lot more ends, and that's where the beta amylase can chew in from the ends.
Yeah.
And so they work hand in hand together to make the starch convert really fast at temperatures of about 65 in a wet environment.
Yep.
So you might get conversion in as little as 10 or 15 minutes in a nice enzyme-rich environment at the right temperatures. We're trying as much as we can to avoid that.
Yeah.
So everything that you'd normally want to do in a brew, the things that you'd normally try to achieve to get great starch conversion, get the most bang for your buck, convert all your malt starches into sugars, we're deliberately not doing that. We're willfully going in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So what we did was I got the guys at Grain and Grape to crush me a grain bill last night. They made the one recipe to rule them all as written, its normal thing. They mashed that into 15 litres of water for me, nice and cold, and put it in the cool room overnight to soak.
We're fortunate to have a large cool room. We can do that. So would you?
So that was easier than me trying to cram it into a fridge.
Into a fridge. But if you're trying this at home, you probably should try and, if you've got a fermentation fridge or something.
I mean, if you're living in a cool part of the world, you're all right. If you don't, if you possibly can, put it in your fermentation fridge.
Yep.
The reason for that isn't because it really needs to be at fridge temperatures for this mashing experiment. It's essentially to stop the lactic acid bugs on the malt from taking the little bit of sugar that is dissolved out of it and starting to ferment it and make it go sour.
A bit sour, yep.
Which, if that was happening slowly, might be a good thing if we were normally mashing the beer. But we're not.
Yes. I'll just get you to pause there. Sorry, I'm just going to, because I'm recording this, just set the camera.
Okay.
Okay, yep, good. You may continue.
No worries. So normally in a mash, one of the things you might want to do is lower the pH of your mash to get it to where the enzymes convert starch most effectively. That's at around about 5.4, 5.2 pH, which is a bit lower than you'd get from normally mashing pale grain in water. And you would normally add some salts to your mash or maybe some acid to your mash to drop that pH. Because we don't want to convert starch, I've deliberately left those salts out of the water. And I'm hoping, although I do not know, it's something we might check together, that the pH of this is a bit higher than that. So I'm actually going to check.
Okay.
Before I do that, I'll tell you what else I've done.
Yep.
So I got here this morning and I drained that bag out, and what I got out of it was this. Can you tilt with that?
Show it. I'll see if we can zoom in. So everyone, hopefully you can see that it's quite murky.
It's quite murky,
so
but
that's what you. Yep. Sorry,
quite
go ahead.
Dark.
And yeah, it is too. Yeah.
So that's where all the colour and flavour and most of the enzymes are. I thought I would try to let it settle out a bit, let the murk settle out, and I want to leave it behind because A, it's a bit murky. There's probably things in there I don't really want in my beer. And B, some of that stuff will be starch. And at some point in the near future, I'm actually going to raise the temperature of this mash up. And because all the enzymes are in there, when I do that, whatever starch is in there is going to convert. So if I can leave it behind in the bucket, all the better. it does not look like it's settling out in any reasonable pace.
Okay.
So we're going to skip that bit.
Just going to roll
if you're
it.
doing it at home, maybe turn it into a 2-day process.
Right.
Soak this stuff overnight to extract the flavours, drain it out, and then pop that bucket back in the fridge, let it settle out. And it will settle out fairly clear, because what was on top this morning in the original mash bag was reasonably clear. I mean, it's not going to be crystal clear, but at least it won't be quite this murky.
I guess there's proteins and stuff in there that'll just drop out because they're heavier.
Yeah, I think it's mostly going to be sort of floury, starchy things that are the stuff that's left in there. The other thing I thought I'd do would be essentially sparge it. I'm going to mix this with a quantity of water that I've got boiling in here. I thought, oh, what if I extract a bit more flavour by sparging it? So I actually put some water into this bucket and gave it a sparge, and a bit of colour's come out of it.
Yeah.
It's quite nice, but not too much compared to the original one.
Looks more like a normal mash colour, I guess you would say. Not necessarily the cloudiness, but...
Yeah, and I think I would probably like to use that if I was doing the rest things overnight and I could get that clear. But I think between here and here, I've got too much starch in there that I actually don't want to collect. So I'm going to assume there is enough flavour in here to make this a reasonable beer. And I'm going to mix it with the 15 litres of water I've got in the urn boiling at the moment.
So just to summarise, that's just from squeezing the bag only. That's
just from draining the bag.
Just draining the bag.
Didn't even give it a squeeze because I was dunking it in there.
And then the other one is your mash. Yep.
The other one.
Sorry, your sparge water.
Yeah, so I just dunked it in 15 litres of water.
Okay. And you may be going to talk about this anyway, so forgive me if I'm jumping ahead. But have you, for your gravity calculations, did you work those out in advance, or you just kind of?
Well, I'm seeing what happens. So I know what the one recipe that rules them all does. In a brew in a bag system, one recipe that rules them all will give me 10.49. Pretty much within a point every single time I make it. I am hoping to get 1/4 of that. That's what the Bryce article suggests I'm going to get, is about 1/4 of the gravity I would expect from mashing the beer. I don't know yet what it's going to be.
Okay. Hence the experiment.
We're going to mix these together, bring it up to boiling temperature, and I'm going to take a gravity, and we're all going to find out together what it actually is.
Cool.
And that's kind of where we're at now. So we've cold steeped, we've strained it out. If you have time, you could maybe sparge it and let things settle clear and then use that liquid. That would be great. In the interests of not hanging around for 2 hours while this stuff clears out, I'm just going to use the cloudy stuff and mix it with water today. I'll get a slightly less flavourful beer than otherwise I would, because whatever flavour compounds are in that bucket, I'm not going to take today. But you can see there's probably enough in there that makes it worth saving.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm going to put this back up to boiling. I've got, actually don't know how much liquid I've got in there. That was 13 litres of water, and it's a bit lower than that. It's a few litres lower than that. So I've probably got something on the order of 10 litres in here, and I've got boiling water in here. And so what I'm hoping happens is that when I tip this in here, I'm going to get an instant rise to about 70 odd degrees. I'm just trying to mental through the calculations. I had worked it out for 13 litres of liquid in there. Oh, I can make it 13 litres of liquid. It's cloudy anyway. So that's what I'm going to do. Serendipitous experiment. I'm going to tip this into here, and then if it's too warm, I'm going to tip that into there to cool it down, and if it's too cool, I'm going to bang this in there to, as quickly as possible, get it up to high mash temperatures. The reason I'm aiming for high mash temperatures, not low mash temperatures, is because I want low alcohol beer. So I am going to convert some starch to sugar because all my enzymes there, and I'm about to make my starch and my enzymes hot. But preferably, I would like to convert to dextrins, to long chain sugars that are not fermentable, that are going to stay in the beer, but are going to give that beer body and mouthfeel rather than alcohol content.
Yeah.
So that's the plan.
So that's in the higher range of high 60s to low 70s, isn't it?
That's exactly right. Actually, let me just do a little calculation here, because I think I'm going to end up too cool. I might need to heat that up a bit. See, you know that I'm experimenting.
When you're doing calculations on the fly.
So I've got, let's say, 10.
Just for anyone watching, the device Dan was holding up earlier was a heat stick, and I find those quite handy. Just to have on hand. Even though I'm a Braumeister user myself, sometimes you just need to heat up a separate bucket of water or any reason like that. I do find those things always have a use for them. They run on electricity, of course. So the chat's gone quiet. The perfect crime.
That's not going to be too bad.
If anyone has any questions or anything, any comments, feel free to ask. But I think.
Or have we just confused everybody? They're not sure what I'm doing or why I'm doing it.
Everyone's been, pretty. Earlier on, we're giving some subtle. Ben was just getting a drink of water for anyone wondering what was going on there. People, I think, are enjoying it so
I'll do
far.
it from this side. Okay, so basically, 13-ish litres of boiling water in here, 10-ish litres of room temperature water in here. I'm going to throw it in there and see what temperature I come out at. I'm going to get my thermometer.
Yep.
So that I can tell. My mixer, my trusty brew in a bag masher. It's the Bunnings paint stirrer. So my demos are normally just regular brews where I demonstrate brewing in a bag, because brewing in a bag is still my belief that brewing in a bag is the way to get someone to start brewing. And so that's my trusty mash stirrer. I use it for brewing a bag, and I use it at home on my fancy Herms system as well, because it just all the mash paddles and things like that, they just don't work as well as this. You just give this a bit of a jig and away it goes. All right, let's have a go at this and see what happens, shall we? Oh, see, there is a fair bit of scudge still left on the bottom of that.
Okay, so a little bit settled out.
Yeah, so I probably could have stopped pouring because I noticed it changed colour as a bit of this came through. But I reckon I've probably left a fair bit more behind in there that I'll put in. So that's a good thing, and that's positive, part of what we were trying to achieve. Let's see what temperature we got. Oop.
Speaking of temperature, this is a quick question. When you steep, steep is up to the steep temperature. Well, it was in the fridge, Michael, so that's the question. So Michael asked what was the steep temperature? As cold as you get.
Yeah, more or less. It was room temperature water put in the fridge overnight. So it would have been, it probably would have taken all night to cool down to basically 4 degrees, I'm going to say. That wasn't really the goal. I wasn't targeting a temperature there. It was simply cold to not convert starch, and in the fridge so that I didn't get any bacteria activity was the object there. So there wasn't really a target, so I didn't actually measure.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, now, I did actually hit like about a mid-60s temperature, and I was hoping for a high 60s to 70s temperature. So I've bunged the heat stick in to try and get things up to that low 70s temperature as fast as I can. So I think what I'm going to do is up to the boil, I'm going to have got most of my conversion. I'll probably pause for a little while at about 72 or 73 degrees Celsius. That will give me lots of alpha amylase activity, and by then most of the beta amylase will be on its way out, and that's going to promote the enzymes chopping the starch molecules up into lengthy unfermentable sugars rather than short fermentable sugars. So the beta amylase works best at about 65 degrees Celsius and starts to die off at anything much above that.
Okay.
Once you're sort of hitting 66, 67, its activity's tapering away and it's denaturing. At 70, it's all going to die fairly fast. At 72, 73, it's going to die really quite fast. But it will do some things, and it will do it quickly in the hot environment. So I'll get some sugars. Alpha amylase likes it at about 70 or 72 degrees Celsius. So I'll have a little bit of a pause there to let the alpha amylase convert all the starch that is in this, because I don't want starch in my boil. That'll just make my beer cloudy.
Yes.
And I'm already up to 71.5. So between the urn and the heat stick, I've got a fair amount of heating capacity
Going through there.
in this. What I will probably do next time is that liquid that I've dumped in there, I'll heat it up to about 45 degrees Celsius, and then I'll just do a back of the card calculation to go, okay, this much at 100, this much at 45 is going to give me
Yep.
the
Hit the mark.
temperature. It's pretty easy to do. You just average out the heat quantities.
Yep. And the idea, and as you were saying earlier, but just to recap too, the leaving those longer chain sugars, the starches behind, will, in theory, give you a bit of body to the beer, which is obviously what you want in a low alcohol beer as well.
So I'm at 73 or 74, and I'm seeing proteins coagulating on the top of my wort, which means I've got enzymes dying, enzymes being denatured. That at this point will mostly be the beta amylase, and this is up to 73.5, nearly 74 now. So my alpha amylase is going to be tapering off. Just going to give it a little rest at this temperature to convert my starches, and not a bad guess, I'm right at the 1 cube level on the mark, which is what I was aiming for. So basically I'm aiming for about a 23 litre volume before the boil, boil off 2 or 3 litres during the boil, leave a few litres behind in the urn, and cube up a nice 17 litre cube. I will go and get one just to show you what I'm actually attempting to do in a moment.
Here's one we prepared earlier.
Here's one we prepared earlier, yes. So whilst this sits for 5 or 6 minutes, I'll explain what this is and how we're going to get to it. So as I think all the demos that G&G do these days, and something that I will happily say that Jeff and I introduced to Grain and Grape, is we're going to no chill today. So traditional brewing techniques, especially for you guys who are in the States, less so for Australia because no chill's popular here now. You finish the boil and you rapidly chill your wort down to fermentation temperatures. You either use an immersion chiller, which is a big spiral of copper that you dunk in this bucket and run tap water through, and that coil of cold water will cool the wort down. Or you might run it through a heat exchanger, either a plate heat exchanger or a counterflow heat exchanger, and cool it down as you pump it to your fermentation vessel. The objective of that is, of course, to cool the wort down so it's cold enough to pitch yeast into. In Australia, probably close to 10 years ago now, we had a significant drought, like a really hardcore drought. There was heaps of water restrictions, and home brewers started looking at the amount of water that was running through their chillers onto their lawn and going, I'm starting to feel bad about that, you know. Especially people who lived in the country who were running off tank water, and you know their tanks had 6 inches of water in it. And it's like, how can I do this without so much water? And somebody basically thought, it breaks a lot of brewing rules. If you read the literature and you read at this level, there's reasons why this won't work, but let's try hot packing it. So straight out of the hot kettle at 100 degrees or pretty close to it, you run your wort into a HDPE cube that's nice and clean, and you seal it up hot like it's a jar of jam. You can, if you like to, and it's one of my favourite techniques, put hops and things in that cube as well, but you don't have to. So you let your wort settle, you whirlpool it, you take nice clear wort and you put it into here. Now, I can hear American people howling at the top of their lungs.
There is some controversy over there about it.
Yes, howling at the top of their lungs that you will never get cold break if you don't chill rapidly. And I'm here to say, as a professional brewer, bollocks. Cold break is not about how fast you chill your wort, it is about how cold the wort gets. So if you chill your wort slowly, your cold break will form slowly, but it will nonetheless form. The colder you get it, the more cold break will form. What happens here is it cools down slowly, cold break forms slowly. The difference is that, my opinion of the difference is that when it cools slowly, it forms very fine flocks that fall out slowly. But I have done some experimenting as part of my brewing education. I've done the Ermhoff tubes and done the settling rates. Most home brewers who believe they're leaving their cold break behind in their kettle are kidding themselves. Right. Cold break takes a day to settle out. So if you immersion chilled your wort and you believe that you're leaving cold break behind, you're leaving some of it behind. But really what you're doing is you're allowing your hot break to settle out really well, and you think you've left your cold break behind. It almost certainly is in your fermenter and it settles out in your fermenter overnight, which is what happens when you counterflow chill. It's what happens when you use a heat exchanger. It's what the big breweries happen. Cold break's fine. It can go in your wort. In this instance, you can see it at the bottom of the cube. Anyone who doesn't believe it happens, the wort that went into this cube was crystal clear when it went in, no hot break in it. And now there's a whole bunch of break material in the bottom of it. And unless that's cold break, I don't know
what
where
else
it's come from. Because I've seen this process. This is made on a small commercial brewery here at the shop.
Indeed.
And the wort that went in there was clear. Commercially clear wort went into this cube, and now it's cloudy at the bottom, and that's all cold break. So no chill will give you a cold break. It will give you a shelf-stable product. The beautiful thing about no chill, one of the reasons I like it, is that it divorces brew day from fermentation day. So if you have a limited fermentation capacity at home, your fermenter's full, but you've got a free weekend on which you'd love to brew, a lot of people just go, well, I can't brew because
so much time, I've got to cram everything in.
So it's too hard. With no chill, you can brew 5 weekends in a row, and then when you've got no time to brew, but you've got time to shove a fermenter in the fridge, you can ferment those later. That would be shelf stable for months and months and months. I've fermented 6-month-old cubes and made beautiful beer out of them. So as long as it was packed hot, sealed well, and not, some people think, oh, well, I'll help this along by chucking it in the swimming pool and cooling it down fast.
That is hard.
As long as you don't do that and it cools slowly, there's a lot of pasteurisation happening in that cube, and that will be shelf stable. If you muck about and try to cool it down fast, okay, that's great, but treat it like rapidly chilled wort then. Ferment that stuff.
Ferment it sooner than later.
So you can use that as a chiller if you want. You can do that, chuck it in your water tank, chuck it in a bath full of ice.
Or your pool.
Or whatever. But then treat that as chilled wort. Once it's down to pitching temperature, take it out,
put it
brush
in
it off and ferment.
Ferment it straight away. So not even, don't wait till the next day or...
Look, you're probably a little safer with that than... do it next day. I mean, that's cool enough to pitch next day anyway, so if you're worried about time, if you go, oh no, I want it, kick it into the corner of your garage and come back next day, it'll be cold. Cold enough to pitch.
And that's more a safety thing as well, is it? Or is it just about the staling things that can happen?
It's about safety. So the only stories I've ever heard of people getting infections in the cube. So every now and again someone will go, oh, no chilled, and I came back 3 weeks later and the thing was blown up like a balloon. You always hear them then go tell you, oh, well, you know, I put it in the bath to cool it down a bit more rapidly, or I did. Yep. I've not heard anyone who follows the basic no-chill technique of put it in there hot, seal it up hot, treat it like a jar of jam, who's had an infection in the no-chill cube.
Yeah.
Some people, the only people I've heard of that happen, have a tap in it. Have put a tap in it and there's been something in the tap.
Oh, okay, yes, okay.
And because that tap's sticking out a bit from the cube, it didn't get hot enough to get sterilised.
Yeah.
But if it's just a cube, it's a smooth inside of a container that's been heated up to 100 degrees Celsius and stayed there for hours and hours as that thing cooled slowly down to below pasteurisation temperature. Yeah. That's pretty safe. It's safe enough that these guys can do it commercially.
Yes.
And doing it at home, we're just doing exactly what these guys do commercially. Although I think you guys put a squirt of CO2 in there to help.
We do, yeah.
Oxidation.
Yeah. So and that's optional. You know, there's actually Michael Voss just asked the question timely. So if you don't fill the cube to the very top, could you flush CO2 just on the top? You
can, and that absolutely works. Or what these guys do is they'll take all their empty cubes, line them up, and take a CO2 cylinder and just purge each one with CO2. So as it's filling, it's pushing CO2 out. So the headspace is all CO2.
Yeah.
What I actually do is I squeeze it. My technique is I will take. You might just have to follow me with that.
Okay.
I'm just going to use this as like a wall demonstration. So pretend this is the wall. I'll take the cube, loosen the lid off just so that it's ever so slightly loose, tilt it back, put a tea towel over it so I don't put a knee into it until I squeeze all the air out of it. So, because this is flexible and it's hot, so it's pretty easy to squeeze. Squeeze it till a bit of liquid comes out and then seal it up. And so you get a slightly squished but completely full cube.
Yep. So yeah, Michael, yeah, you can just purge as standard practice. If you, it's not, again, it's optional, but just purge the cube before you fill it with CO2 if you so want. And I'll just reinforce, what you were saying earlier, Dan, because we have a no chill method video online with Ben running through the steps. So we do get a lot of questions on there. Can I speed this up? Can I put it in the fridge or in the pool? And I think just exactly what you said is that we don't recommend that as a standard practice. People do it, and I guess as you said, make sure you ferment it quickly if you do. But generally, let it cool naturally overnight. Don't try and artificially cool it.
It's a situation where you either chill or no chill. The danger is in the middle. If you try to hedge your bets and go a bit of both, that's where you're opening yourself up to things going wrong. The no chill technique was developed and refined to pretty much address all the concerns that people had. So people sort of said, well, what about oxidation? Okay, so you make a real concerted effort to squeeze all the air out of the cubes. You'll see these commercial ones have got hardly any in the top. What about cold break? Well, we demonstrated that that's okay anyway. What about infection? Well, you've got lots of pasteurisation units, don't chill it down. So almost all the things that can go wrong are addressed by the basic technique. It's when you try to shortcut your shortcut, that's when you get in trouble. I find the same thing with brew in a bag. Brew in a bag pushes the paradigms of brewing sort of up close to its edges in the first place. You know, you've got a really high liquid to grist ratio. You've got, it's mainly the liquid to grist ratio. You're not doing a lauter step. You're not doing a sparge step. So what you're doing is you're nudging a well-taken process up against the edges of its parameters. Not really going too far over. Where you get in trouble is you get someone who learns that as their first technique and then goes, I know, I've thought of a shortcut.
Another shortcut,
Unaware that the whole technique's a series of shortcuts.
It's already probably at its limit.
And no chill's a series of shortcuts too. So if you start shortcutting these techniques, you've shortcutted a shortcut of a shortcut, and suddenly you're over the edge into things that are going to go wrong territory.
Yeah.
Now, it's like everything, you'll probably do it 5 times and it'll be right, but who wants to mess up every 6th brew?
Yeah, like that 1 out of every 6 brews or 1 out of every 10 brews.
Yeah,
like it's just not worth. If you've ever had to dump a batch of beer, it's heartbreaking, and it's just it's not worth taking the risk.
That's right.
I have read people saying, well, pasteurisation happens at 62 degrees. It happens instantly. Why do you need to let it? You don't need to let it chill slowly. Just I don't listen to them.
It doesn't happen instantly. So the person who said that doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yeah,
so that's the issue.
That's the internet comment section is not always.
I know
it's an alert place.
It sounds self-serving, but you've got to watch the internet. There's a whole bunch of people who can say anything on the internet. Before you start listening to people, convince yourself that they're worth listening to.
First, exactly.
If you see something online from a homebrew shop like this, you know that it's come out of the mouth of people who own a homebrew shop trust, or it's the people who own the homebrew shop themselves. These guys do this stuff for a living. Half the people who give demonstrations at this shop are professional brewers. They do actually know what they're talking about. And I'm going to say more so than Barry off the internet, who you've never heard of before. So if it comes down to, the guy who runs a microbrewery on his own, or Barry off the internet, maybe listen to the guy who owns a brewery first.
And, we love you, Barry, but just stay away from the keyboard.
Don't take that as a never listen to anyone on the internet argument. But
consider the source.
If there's an argument about what's right and what's wrong, maybe consider the source a bit. That said, if you want to chill, I don't chill anymore because I find no chill convenient. But there's nothing wrong with chilling. I mean, it's a
using the proper equipment.
Me wanting to do this isn't in any way telling you to do this and stop doing what you're currently doing.
We're not preaching no chill over everything else. It's just another tool in your kit.
It's another tool in the kit. It can be really flexible. I actually find it. I've done a bit of an end-to-end analysis. I believe that there's less chance of infection going down the no-chill route than there is going down the chilling route. Okay. There's less sitting of your wort, less exposure of infectable wort to the environment, I believe, with the no-chill step than there is with the chilling steps. It's maybe arguable.
Sure.
But I'm pretty confident that this is a very safe and very effective technique. So we've talked about no chilling. That's what we're going to end up with at the end of this, hopefully. We're going to use this to do it. I'm looking in here now and I've got some nice break on top and it's cleared up a little bit, which says to me things have settled down and probably conversion has taken place of the starches and things that are in there. I'm still at over 70 degrees Celsius, and so I think the time has come to bring it up to a boil.
Okay.
So bang both my elements back on, get that thing up to a boil. And really from here on in, I'm going to treat it just like a regular brew.
Yeah, right.
What I am going to do is maybe we can take a break for 5 minutes. I'll have a glass of water.
Yep.
And I'm going to get some brewing salts and hops and things ready for this. And after 5, I'll come back. This will be pretty close to the boil. I'll have a less sore throat. And I'll have some hops and some brewing salts, and we'll talk about that part of the process.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Well, we're going to take 5, so maybe grab yourselves a drink, and we will be right back. go. We're back.
We're back. All right. All right. So in the meantime, we've gained a bit of heat in the kettle, which is good. And I'm going to start putting kettle additives in. So one of the things that I did differently in the mash this time, apart from the obvious coldness, was I left brewing salts out of the mash. So one of the reasons you put brewing salts into the mash is to lower the pH, so that you end up with a pH at 5.2, 5.4, and you get better conversion of starch into sugar. I don't want that. So I let the pH lie where it was. Now I didn't take the pH. I wasn't attempting to influence it, so it's possible that the pH was in the right zone anyway. Possibly if I was doing this at home, not concentrating on talking to a demo, I might have been together enough to remember to take that pH. What I am going to do is take a boil pH. One of the things I want at the end of this is hopefully a boil pH that's a little lower than normal. And the reasons for that is probably the bit I'm going to talk about now. We want a low alcohol beer. So we can do that in a few different ways. I've really got to convince that alarm not to go off. One, we can not turn starch into sugar. Two, pretty obviously, we can not ferment the sugar we do make into alcohol, and that's part of this step. So I didn't put brewing salts in to the mash because I didn't want to make an ideal mash environment. I am going to put brewing salts into the kettle because I want a pH drop in the kettle. I want preferably to end up with a boil pH of about 5.1, maybe 5. That's at the slightly lower end of the post-boil pH scales, and a slightly lower pH post-boil can lead to slightly lower attenuation. Because I'm looking at maybe a 10-12 beer and fermenting it down to hopefully not much lower than 005, 006 to get my 0.5%-ish alcohol, if I can get an extra point of no attenuation by tweaking the boil pH, that's what I'm going to aim for. So hopefully, that just chokes off fermentation slightly. I'm going to have a bit of a chat to the shop guys about using low attenuating yeast that pushes out a fair bit of flavour. Because it's a no alcohol beer, I want a bit of extra flavour in it. I want to get a bit of insight from the shop guys about what's a low attenuating beer that pushes out a fair bit of esters.
Yeah,
so probably an English strain. Yeah,
of course, an English strain. There are some new products on the market which we don't yet stock. We should definitely look into it, but specifically for, I guess, those yeasts we were talking about right at the beginning of the show, that I believe White Labs make one, and I think there's a dry yeast, Lavalin make one as well, which is actually a no alcohol, low alcohol producing yeast. So people might want to look at
it'd be interesting to combine one of those yeasts with this technique and see just how little alcohol you can make. Might not be any point using one of those yeasts if there's so little conversion.
Doing this anyway, which might negate
I was thinking maybe I might use a Nipa yeast.
Cool, yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, you got a cloudy wort, so cloudy mash so far anyway. It might clear up.
Well, for a start, that's one of the things I've gone through in this thought process is how do I make this beer tasty at the end of it? And one of the things that's going to be missing is palate weight and body and mouthfeel. So I'm targeting. Whoop, there we go. We've got a boil now. See, take him. I was looking at the pot thinking, it's not coming to a boil.
And then all of a sudden,
take your eye off it and bingo, bango, boil.
Yep.
One thing with these heat sticks is if you can give them a bit of a wipe while they're still warm and wet, they're easy to clean. If you let them dry out, they're a bastard to clean.
Yes.
Oh, I've got some serious boil action going in there. I haven't seen a crown urn boil that hard for ages.
Yeah.
Oh my God. All right.
That's a good tip for cleaning in general. You're better off cleaning sooner than later with everything in brewing.
Yeah, not least of all because there's a fair chance you're going to be drunk by the end of brewing. And you won't want to clean it later.
If you're drinking and brewing, yeah.
Especially if you're one of the lucky ones like me who's got a garage or a separate brewing area, you'll look at your mess with a bit of drink in you and go, I'll clean that tomorrow. And you'll walk out of your brewery and you'll go inside and you'll forget about it tomorrow. And then it won't be till next weekend that you remember, and you'll be astounded at the varieties of mould that can grow on your brewing gear if you ignore it for a week. It's hilarious. Wow. Is there any chance you can get a shot in the pot? Because we've got some serious chunky hot break action.
Oh, really?
There.
Okay. Let's see if I can do this without making people look away. For those of you who are prone to motion sickness, I'll do my best.
Sorry about the impromptu walking camera work, guys, but it's pretty impressively chunky in there.
Watching I don't bring all the cables down. All right, here we go. Oop. So far, so good. I think that's probably as close as I can get. But okay, yeah, I can kind of make them out. I hope everyone at home can sort of see. Focus. Yeah, so that is quite. You can see a lot of chunky sort of stuff floating around in there.
All right, and that's the proteins mostly.
Yeah.
So because there was a bit of haze in there, what'll have happened is the proteins will have flocked out and they'll have picked up a bit of the haze as well while they were doing it. So it's going to be those protein flocks have formed and they've just gathered a bit of goop in with them as they're formed.
Yeah.
But you can see the actual wort in between the flocks is pretty clear.
Got it.
So that's what I want to see, because that means that all that starch, which would now have dissolved because it's hot in there, has pretty much been converted. So I haven't got a starchy boil. Maybe I've got too much sugar. I don't know how much starch went across there. I might have more sugar than I was aiming for, but I do not have starchy, which is nice because that will mean I won't have a terribly cloudy beer. I won't have a beer that's prone to infection.
And that all that chunky stuff being, that'll kind of clump together as well, and that'll fall out, hence making a clear.
So that's, your regulation. That's your regulation hot break, which we're getting because this cold extraction technique, really the only thing it leaves behind is the starch, and it leaves behind beta-glucans. They don't dissolve out particularly well. Almost as much protein comes out as if we'd have normally mashed, almost as much colour. So we get almost the same amount of everything except starch and beta-glucans. There's a little bit of difference, but not too much. And probably a bit less tannin because everything was nice and cold.
Yeah, yeah, sure, yeah. And that's a technique that people use. How well it works, I think, is probably subjective, but for making darker beers, stouts, they'll steep and a lot of you probably watching this at home know about this technique already, but you can steep the dark portion of your grain bill in the fridge overnight, and the idea is you get the colour without too much of the roast or the bitterness.
Yeah. So you get something that tastes like a nice smooth black coffee rather than astringent.
Yeah. That's the theory.
So think of this whole technique essentially as an extension of that.
Yeah.
We're getting the flavour and we're getting all the other stuff. We're just not getting the starch, hopefully. And the other thing too that's worth remembering from a parsimonious homebrewer perspective is that brewing a bag over there is still full of starch.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to make essentially an adjunct beer, so if you wanted to make a barley wine where simply adding more ingredients would make it too intense, but you want the alcohol, you could use that leftover grain as an adjunct. Now, it's never been hot. It's just a bag full of basically barley starch that if you mix that with enzymatic malts now, it's going to convert that starch. So you could use that as a portion of a new brew to add basically extract without any flavour.
Yep. Oh, okay. Okay, interesting. Like a reverse party guile.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's the opposite part of the
market. Yeah.
All right, so this boil settled down to a more reasonable rate now. It's going a bit berserk. I've started my timer. I want to put some brewing salts in it. For the purposes of demos and for the purposes of talking to beginners about brewing salts, I don't go into heavily detailed water chemistry. For those of you who don't know, we're in Melbourne, Victoria in Australia, and the water here is butter soft. Makes Pilsen water look like it's hard. So I treat Melbourne water effectively as a blank canvas. It might as well be rainwater. And in my experience, enough calcium comes in a teaspoon, a good heaped teaspoon of whichever calcium salt you like.
Okay.
So if you're making a hoppy beer, make that gypsum. If you're making a malty beer, make it calcium chloride. You know, if you're dancing down the middle line between those two, a half of each. If you're making an IPA, an extra half of the gypsum. You know, so that's what I do with the one recipe to rule them all. That's what I tell guys at demos all the time. A teaspoon. If it's a very malty or very hoppy, another half a teaspoon. And just steer it towards malty or hoppy with your choice between salts. I usually like to put in a teeny tiny bit of magnesium sulfate, just to get a bit of magnesium in the mix as well. But that's not terribly necessary as long as there's plenty of calcium. I'll get more bang for my buck from my calcium because I've put it in the boil, so none of it's going to have been removed by removing phytase in the mash. It will still do a bit of a job in here. I want the pH drop and I want the calcium. So using that NEPA theory, I want plenty of calcium in this to give me a nice soft mouthfeel.
And the yeast do like a bit of calcium too, don't they?
So this is going to get 2 teaspoons.
2 teaspoons.
2 teaspoons of calcium
sort of
chloride.
heaped teaspoons.
Two nice rounded teaspoons.
Round,
Don't stack it up as much as you can. Nice rounded teaspoons. Measuring spoons, not your kitchen teaspoons. And that will be enough, especially given this is an experiment. I'll taste it, see how it goes. Next time I might use more. I know that there's about 7 grams in one of those teaspoons. I've measured it in the past. I did all the calculations. Don't think I didn't do them. I did all the calculations and I worked out that the amount I want just happens to be around about a teaspoon. So that's where I work.
And you added a bit of extras. That was to recap. So that was 2 teaspoons because you want that extra mouthfeel.
I really want the chloride. I'm going to get some more bang for my buck because it's just in the boil. So I'm amping the chloride feel up. What I might actually think about doing is once the beer is fermented and we've tasted it, think about adding things to the post-fermented beer, probably some table salt, once again for a bit of extra chloride, and maybe, just maybe, depending on where the mouthfeel of the beer sits, some dextrins, or possibly some glycerol.
I've never
so glycerol
done that myself, but
glycerol contributes quite strongly to palate weight and mouthfeel. So the things that contribute to palate weight and mouthfeel are dissolved sugars, dextrins and things, proteins and stuff dissolved in the liquid, and glycerol. Glycerin.
So you can just get that from the supermarket. You can buy it in little
exactly.
jars.
I've got a little jar I bought from the chemist for preserving yeast in. But one of the things that gives a mouthfeel is glycerin produced by the yeast. And one of the things that gives NEPAs that soft rounded mouthfeel is that it just so happens that quite a lot of the popular NEPA yeasts are high glycerol producers.
Interesting.
So I won't put any in prior to fermentation or anything like that. That's something that can be added after fermentation. And what I'll do is I'll take glasses of this and I'll taste and I'll do some experimental adding and I'll work out. And really I'll use this as an exercise in learning for the next time
dialing it in for
try it. You know, if I put a drop of glycerol in a pint of beer and it makes a massive difference, hell yeah, I might put a few mils into the keg.
Interesting. Good.
Just to see what happens. You know, I might put some of each, a mixture, see what happens with those additives.
And you do that in the keg is a good idea,
that's right. I'll get the beer ready to serve, and then I'll taste it, and then I'll do some experiments in tasting glasses, and go, okay, so I think X amount of millilitres per milliliter will give me the result I want, and then, as you always do, you put half that much in the keg and have a taste.
Always start with half, and then you can always just build it up.
You know where your top limit is. So start with half, build it up, because if you put it all in there, it's too late, can't take it out.
And for those of you who are bottling, you might have to find a workaround for that. But
well, that's
I guess
right.
you
So,
can do it in a secondary or something. But
this is one where you make this. It might be worth. This might be one that's worth doing a half batch of as an experiment, because I don't expect this to be great first time I ever make it. If it is, I'll be pleasantly surprised. If it shows me potential, I'll be really happy.
Cool. Yeah.
And then that's something I can tweak.
Yep.
And that comes from talking to pro brewers who make no alcohol beers. They all have to do multiple experiments to dial. No one passes it in their first try.
Right. So okay. There's a lot of R&D, I guess, that goes in prior to getting that first beer on the shelves.
On the shelf, yeah, that's right. And there's often a lot of blending back and stuff like that too. People brewing a really low no alcohol one with no hops in it, and they do a small one with hops in it over here, and they'll blend back. And the object is to give you a great packaged product.
Yep.
You don't need to know about what happened.
Yeah. Well, blending is pretty standard practice, I believe, in the pro brewing world, especially at where you work. I'm sure it's just,
yes.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with it.
We blend, but it's really for consistency.
Yes, exactly. That's what it's for.
We get super consistent beers in the big brewing world is because we've got multiple fermenters going at once. If this one's that much off and this one's that much off, we just blend them together.
Blend them, and it's an art.
Mind you, we don't miss by very often. When we miss, what I'd call a disastrous miss at work, home brewers wouldn't even notice that they hit their targets.
But there is, for home brewers, something to consider is blending beers. If you're brewing enough and you have two batches that you can experiment with.
And this
sort of thing.
What this will give you is maybe a reasonably even flavour base with basically no booze in it. So maybe you make this maybe you're trying to make a 2% beer or a 3% beer. What you do is you brew a super flavourful 5% beer, and then you brew a nice evenly based dilution over here. So instead of diluting it with water, you dilute it with this.
Yep.
So you might not ever drink this by itself.
Yep.
You maybe use it as a base for blending back into other beers where you would have otherwise used water.
Yeah, keep it handy on the side, and then you could use it.
That's right.
Good.
I'm not going to put hops in at the start of the boil. I'm going to completely hop burst this, so I'm going to put hops in at the end of the boil before Whirlpool, and I'm going to put. Actually, I might not even do that.
Might cube hop it. Okay, yeah. So that's another technique for anyone out there who's taking notes.
So think of cube hopping as like ultralight Whirlpool hopping. Actually, I'll Whirlpool hop it because that'll make the cube neater. So just make the process a bit simpler. So I'll Whirlpool hop, transfer clean work to the cube. I frequently cube hop. My basic technique nowadays is a small amount of bittering hops at the start, and I'm talking 5 grams, maybe 10 grams, to give me a little baseline bitterness and to give me a tiny bit of hop polyphenols in the boil to encourage hop break. In fact, probably just
a dash.
Just a dash. Just to help the hop break form well. I mean, it doesn't help a lot, makes a small difference. So I like a little bit of hops in my boil just to give me some help with hop break. And the rest of my hops, if I'm putting late edition hops in, they go in the cube.
They just chuck them straight in the cube, and then the work goes on top.
So I fill the cube 3/4 of the way up, put the hops in, top the cube off, scrunch the lid on before those aromas have got a chance to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So it gives you a different aroma result to boil hopping. It gives you a slightly different aroma hop result to dry hopping. It gives you a different aroma hop to hop back in, but it's not less.
It's not less, yes. This is a comment I see. A criticism often about no chilling or hot cubing is that it affects the bitterness and it messes up the hopping ratios.
It does, it affects all of those things.
It affects those things, but it's just different. It's not bad, it's just different.
I would equate it, if you're a person who has swapped from immersion chilling to counterflow or plate heat exchanger chilling, the difference that you found making that swap is about the difference you'll find swapping from either of those to no chilling. It's not the same. You'll have to really learn how to make your hops work, but the hops do work.
Yep.
You can make a beautiful IPA, you can make a great pale ale, you can make a delicate lager. You just have to relearn how to do hops.
Yeah, you adjust it for
now
the
that you know chilling, the same as you would if you swapped from using an immersion chiller to using a plate heat exchanger. Things just don't work the same. It requires you to learn how to do it the new way.
It's a different skill to get your head around, and
Yeah,
once you dial it in, away you go, you're fine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, as soon as all my recipes are now written for no chill, so I don't have to think about it.
Yep.
But it did require a transition period where I learned to tweak stuff.
Do a little bit of
to do no chilling.
Experimenting.
So where are we? We're 12 minutes into the boil. We've got plenty of time. So I've done that. I'm going to put. I've decided to use Citra today because I'm starting to think that maybe some of the NEPA tricks are good tricks for this.
For this type, okay.
If I had a way to get beta-glucans in there, I'd put beta-glucans in there.
Get yourself a can of beta-glucans.
Yeah, I mean, if you could get a can of beta-glucans, I'd probably put some in.
Yeah.
Because that would give me, once again, what I think I'm going to be missing in this ultra-low beer is palate weight. That's what I've noticed in the no-alcohol beers I buy from the bottle shop. The big brewery ones, no, because they've sucked the alcohol out of normal beers, so mostly they feel all right. But craft brew, no-alcohol beers, they're often very light and very dry. Yeah. Even the hoppy ones, they're pretty bone dry. And you can tell the guys who have added stuff to make it not bone dry because you see the difference in the calorie count. So a no alcohol beer that's been brewed and just has no alcohol and has nothing added to it, 30-40 calories. Mm-hmm. If you're looking at a can of no alcohol beer and it's got 80-90 calories in it, that's because there's a few spoons of dextrins or something gone in there to
corn syrup or something, or it's non-fermented.
Amp up the palate weight.
Yeah, palate weight. I like that word palate weight, by the way. When I say mouthfeel, people give me dirty looks. Non-brewers, but palate weights, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel that they're almost different things.
You think? Okay.
Mouthfeel's texture to me, and palate weight's kind of the way
the heaviness
sits on you. And I think a full strength beer sits on your palate a bit more heavily than does a no alcohol beer. Plus, you've then got mouthfeel.
Yep.
So we've got to try and address both those things.
Yep.
And that's the thought process that I went through designing this beer. So we've had our mash that's left the starch out. We've talked about trying to use a low attenuating yeast that gives us decent flavours. That's going to help again with flavour, and it's going to help with palate weight and mouthfeel. We've put calcium chloride in. That's going to help with our mouthfeel and our palate weight. We've talked about the concept that maybe post packaging we could add some things to help with that. If I could put beta-glucans in there, that's where a NEPA gets that beautiful, silky, soft mouthfeel from. And I'm not a fan of NEPAs, I don't like them, but they do feel lovely and velvety in the mouth. So I'm thinking that possibly I'll use a NEPA yeast for the glycerol production. Some of them are relatively low attenuating as well, the English strains, so they give good esters. So I'm thinking maybe NEPA yeast works. And some of the other NEPA techniques, which is all the calciums, lots of proteins, so we never have had a protein rest of any description in this beer, so I'm hoping that even with all that flocculation we saw, we're still left with a decent amount of protein in that beer, which is going to give us, once again, that body in the beer that might otherwise not be there if you simply got your alcohol by not having many starting ingredients.
Yes.
So if instead of using like 1 kilo of starting ingredients and not getting any of that, we've used 4 kilos of starting ingredients. We've got all of that stuff in there. Now the trick is to not lose it.
The
benefit of it.
And I was just thinking too on yeast, I might just pop up here. I wonder, and I'm just spitballing here, just for anyone out there who's taking notes as well, listening. Saisons, some Saison strains, I believe, produce a lot of
glycerol,
those
they do. I think
glycerins as well.
Would be a great strain to use.
Yeah, so it'll be very dry. You wind up with a very dry beer, but I think the French
I think you're going to end up with a dry beer anyway. So
yeah, well, true.
There's a fair chance that whatever yeast we use is going to smash through every last bit of extract we make because it's going to be so small an amount. So it might not actually make any difference.
So you could make like a grisette or something, kind of thing, and a nice dry with a bit of, get some yeast character from, I believe it's the French Saison in particular. Yeah, and it's dry, but it has this really silky sort of mouth feel on the back. It's just, it's like these two opposing things.
I like the way that beer feels in the mouth, but to me the floral characteristics that come off it smell like Nana's sock drawer.
It does have a bit of funk. So you got to like a bit of funk in a beer.
It's that floral. The things that your nan put in her sock drawer. To make it smell
the lavender sort of
like
little pouch.
That 3711 Saison yeast.
Yeah.
It's that one, isn't it? 3711?
Yes, 3711. Yeah.
That always just reminds me of like being in the bedroom with me nan and she's opened up the drawer to take something out and that waft of lavender comes across the room.
These associations of flavour, it
really does that for you.
Yeah. So there you go.
But yeah, that's the sort of thought process. Yep. So I'm sort of aiming at an APA today, but maybe it's going to be a better result aimed at a Saison. Might be a better result aimed at a Belgian Pale Ale. So this recipe comes up well as a Belgian Pale Ale.
Sure.
Use a Saison yeast, you're going to come up with something that's a bit Belgian Pale Ale with maybe that little Saison edge to it. Might come up as a nice golden coloured Saison.
Yeah. So there you go with a one recipe to rule them all.
That's exactly right.
Something to play with.
Well, probably if you're playing with a Saison, you might take the crystal out of that recipe. Mm-hmm. It's still going to end up a bit dark for a Saison, but there's some dark ones.
Yeah.
Just call it farmhouse ale instead of Saison.
Call it farmhouse ale.
You're on your money.
Yeah.
So where are we? What else can we do to make this? So if anyone's got any questions or ideas, throw them up because I'm learning how to do this at the same time.
All learning as we go. Yeah.
And I haven't said it.
If anyone, exactly.
Because there's still time.
If anyone, we're still going. We've got
the other thing
an hour or so, and
the other thing I thought might work well in a beer of this sort is to use a non-flocking yeast. So to use a hef yeast or if you're in Australia, a Cooper's yeast. So one of the things that non-South Australians used to not like about Cooper's beer was that stuff's cloudy. It's got yeast in it. So you'll go to a bar and they'll take a bottle of beer and they'll roll it on the bar to put the yeast back up in suspension, and it makes the beer chewy.
Yep.
What am I missing from this beer? I'm missing chew.
Yes.
So maybe I use a Cooper strain yeast.
Which we have.
Which we could use. I steered clear of that in my head because that's a reasonably high attenuating yeast.
Oh, yeah.
But have a think about that sort of thing too. If the attenuation turns out not to be an issue because we just smash through all the extract anyway, then you can really use any yeast and not worry about that. So maybe a yeast that's a bit floaty that gives you yeast character in the beer. Once again, harking back to that NEPA idea where you've got a bit of stuff in suspension giving palate weight and feel.
Yep.
So I think that a hef yeast or a really powdery yeast that you can maybe roll back up, a Cooper's yeast, something like that, might give you some of the things that you might otherwise be missing in a no-alcohol beer.
Yeah, more things to think of. Now, I'm sorry to cut you off there. What I'm going to do is very quickly throw to a break because I've got to change the battery in the camera. It's about to die.
All right.
But it won't be long this time, guys. It'll be just a minute or two at the most.
Okay, cool.
Be right back. And we are back.
And we're back. Finally, we'd had a break for long enough to let me think about something else to say.
Oh, really? Well, I mean, we can always, I mean, if, you know, we run these shows sort of by feel, so if you're feeling like, we're coming to the end.
Maybe like definitely throw to some of the guys who are out there.
Yeah.
There's a few people listening. Is there anything anyone wants to talk about with regard to like the no alcohol beer or the no chill, or although you didn't get to see much of it, brew in a bag or general brewing stuff?
Yeah, any beginner questions, anything at all?
Questions would be great, because then I don't have to think of more stuff to say.
We did have just a comment by Michael. He's saying a Cooper Sparkling is not the same without the mud. Well, I happen to agree. Some people hate the mud, but I like a rolled Coopers myself.
I prefer it clear, which is often a struggle to get the barman not to roll it.
Not to do it.
But I'm an old school brewer. Neepers freak me out, and hazy beers freak me out. In my poor, sad, classically brewer trained mind, if it's not beer unless it's clear.
It's clear, there's something wrong.
Beers should. A Neeper looks like a glass of Yarra water with foam on top of it.
Yeah.
And it's not attractive. And beers should be attractive. I should look at a beer and start salivating because of the way it looks. And Neepers look like foam.
They do. They look terrible. I agree. Full disclosure, I do like Neepers, but I'm not afraid to admit that they look terrible. It looks like dirty pond water.
I'm not afraid to go out there and say I don't like them.
You're not afraid to. Yeah.
I'm a non-Neeper kind of guy.
Fair enough.
You know, for me, if I want, there's other things if I want something that tastes like fruit salad that's gone off in the sun.
Yeah. Yeah, I think John Palmer calls them. Now it escapes me, but it's something like a vomit beer or.
The worst beer of all is Cloudy Kolsch.
Oh, okay. No, that's weird. Yeah, okay, I've not come across it.
Kolsch yeasts, almost universally, I think all the strains taste like baby vomit. This is why Kolsch's should be crystal clear, not just because of my anal brewer thing, but because Kolsch yeast tastes like.
And that's the butyric acid, is that that they produce?
There's something not right. So a clear Kolsch is a beautiful, delicate beer to experience.
I would never have thought of having a cloudy
spectacular.
Kolsch. Yeah.
But you go to a craft brewery and they hand you a Kolsch, it's cloudy. It's just like,
it's because they probably haven't been able to chill it, or
no one's got time to make beers crystal clear in craft breweries these days. And that's my main issue with Neepers, isn't that Neepers are cloudy, and I don't like cloudy Neepers. It's infected all the other beers. Now nobody bothers to try and make any beer clear anymore.
True. Well, it is. There's a technical challenge, I suppose, too. Well, as for craft brewers who have limited time and resources, I guess, as well. They've got
but it's my annual retention.
Sure.
Large brewer bones. I know there's nothing wrong with.
We're not knocking.
Not clear beer. It's just that makes my eyebrows twitch,
Well, going back to the low alcohol or no alcohol beers for a moment, you're finding there's the craft versions creeping onto the market these days?
There's lots of craft versions creeping onto the market. A few starting to come out in Australia, but quite a lot from overseas. So, like I said, my wife, Holly, has been really getting into the non-alcoholic beers, which is sort of prompting this. And she's importing a lot of stuff. Yeah. Basically, there's a couple of websites around that, they're collating collections of non-alcoholic beers to sell, which I think makes a great business model, because suddenly you don't have to worry about liquor licenses and things like that.
Oh yeah, because all the paperwork is different.
So you're not paying tax. You don't need a license. You're essentially just
it's a food product, I guess.
Shipping soft drinks around.
Yeah. Soft drink. Okay. Yeah.
And so it's a great business model. They're shipping cans of soft drinks around and charging $5 a pop for them.
Yeah. Sober. Sober is the
Sober.
SOBAH.
Sober. We've got Upflow. What is it? Heaps Normal is starting to come out. I think they're Queensland guys.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think there's 2 or 3 in Melbourne/Victoria, and there's probably an equivalent amount in the other big states.
Yeah.
Starting to be a selection of Australian stuff. We're drinking a lot of the Brewdog stuff.
Yes,
so Brewdog's
sure.
made a big effort to make non-alcoholic versions of a lot of its beers.
Yep.
They've started a non-alcoholic beer bar in London, so they've opened
good,
a bar
okay.
that only serves non-alcoholic stuff.
Yeah.
And they're not making, I don't think they're making in their Australian plant yet,
Right.
non-alcoholic beers, but I suspect they're going to.
Keep your eyes out. I bet they will. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
And I quite
no-brainer.
like their beers. That I think they've got enough experience now that they're starting to really
Get
make
their head
them.
around it.
I've been drinking a lot of Brewdog's Punk alcohol-free, Nanny State,
Yeah, Nanny's.
and I really like Adnam's Ghost Ship.
Okay, and you can find these in larger bottle shops, have you? Because I haven't had a good
Don't know
look
about the
myself. but-
Adnams. I think you can find the Brewdog stuff.
Yeah.
Like I said, been
you're
ordering them online.
Ordering online, getting them shipped in from actually from overseas.
There's Australian guys who are doing it. Holly's found that the Brewdog stuff's cheaper to actually buy directly from them and ship in from
in the
England.
UK, yeah. Yeah, I think the only one I've tried of theirs been able to get is Dead Pony Club, which is not it's a mid-strength, isn't it? I don't
Yeah.
think it's an alcohol-free
Yeah,
beer,
and,
but
you know, they're low alcohol beers. They're not the same, but beats the crap out of you know, some of the bad low alcohol lager offerings.
yeah. I mean, if you got a choice between a
I think
mid-strength
there's
craft,
just going to be beers that take the low alcohol thing. I think low alcohol lagers are all right.
Yeah.
It's like a Heineken
yeah,
00. On a hot day,
serve the
Heineken
job
00 is all right.
purpose.
It's fine.
Yeah.
But I think the hoppy ones take it quite well.
Yeah,
I think beers that have got something else in,
the hops can
yeah.
add something a bit more to that's lacking from a.
And I've had one of the no alcohol Hefs. I think it was an Erdinger.
Oh yeah. Actually, the non-alcoholic Erdinger is it's not terrible.
Pretty good. And
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of alcoholic Erdinger.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think there's a few of I think Weissteiner makes a good one. I think Verheinstefan makes a good non-alcoholic Hef. Maisel, which is my favourite Hef, makes a non-alcoholic version. So I haven't been able to track their non-alcoholic Hef down, but I've got high hopes for that.
Yeah. It is unfortunate. Being in Australia here, things tend to be a bit later coming to the party. Products and stuff coming from overseas. So yeah, if you find any, no affiliation with any of the bigger bottle shops or breweries or anyone out there. So I won't recommend any. But
if anyone's
see any on the shelf,
I mean, if anyone's there, stick it up on the chat so that other people
let
are
everyone
listening.
know. And actually,
So
if you're
got
watching,
good source,
if anyone's watching this later on in the future, pop comments section. Let us know where you're getting your alcohol-free beers from, if you're finding any.
Especially if you're finding good local stuff.
Yeah, especially good ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all well and good to say Maiselweiss makes a great Hef, but if you can find a local one, that's fantastic.
Any local breweries who are craft guys who are making good stuff, let everyone know.
One thing I'll touch on that you may have heard about in the news, and something that's going to be important for us today, is food safety. So, non-alcoholic beers, by definition, have no alcohol, which is one of the biggest hurdles to infection in a beer. Normally, beer it's widely regarded as an inherently safe product. Basically, even at home, you'd be working really hard to make a beer that had something in it that was going to make somebody ill.
Yep.
You know, if you leave that much yeast in the bottom of it, you might give them the squirts. But you're not going to hurt anyone with your beer. You're not making cheese, you're not making a sausage. This stuff's got no alcohol in it. So one of the major things that makes it safe isn't there. We've still got a long boil, we've still got hot products, we've still got it's long boil hot products and alcohol, which is really the
pH
and general purpose. pH and general purpose sanitation. So that's one of the reasons to make sure that our pH is all right at the end of the boil. It's going to drop in fermentation anyway.
Yes, sure.
But fermentation is going to be short. So
you might
we need to make sure.
Yeah.
And there's not going to be booze. So we need to be careful with our sanitation, and you're going to need to be careful with the finished product, because it's not beer in the traditional sense.
Treat it, yeah, sure, yeah.
It's not even beer by the taxation department's definition of beer. It's got to have a certain amount of booze before it is beer. So it won't be as safe. My strong suggestion, if you make no alcohol beer, is you treat it like you would another food product. So don't put this one in the shed to sit, or under the house to sit. Put it in the fridge. Treat it like a block of cheese or a carton of milk or a pack of sausages, and you'll be all right, because it's going to be pretty well packaged. It's going to be cleanly packaged. It's going to have a few of those hurdles to infection. So we're going to make it like a clean food product, treat it at the end like a clean food product rather than like a beer, and then you'll be all right. But be aware that one of the things that makes it safe isn't there anymore. So it's probably not going to be a problem.
Yep.
But because no one's got that much experience in this stuff, I know talking to pro brewers, big brewery pro brewers are worried about small brewers who don't have pasteurisers, who are doing this because they're concerned that somebody might get it wrong and hurt someone, and that's going to be bad for everybody.
Yeah.
Most of the breweries that are doing this are pasteurising it.
Yeah, they use like a flash pasteuriser.
Yeah, flash pasteuriser or a tunnel pasteuriser for their packaged products and that sort of stuff. And Guinness just recalled their no alcoholic stout because they were worried it was contaminated.
Really? Okay.
So they didn't give any details about what it was, so I'm not sure if it was contaminated or if they were worried about an infection. But one of the biggest brewing companies in the world has just recalled one of their no alcohol beers over food safety concerns.
Okay.
So it's something that can happen to everyone. So it is something to be not frightened of, but aware of in this process.
Sure. Yeah. And just to recap on that point too. So generally, we talk about infection in beer a lot. And I think I raised this point back when I was doing the Yeast starter demo a few weeks back. For new brewers, the word infection, or for non-brewers, you say the word infection and it kind of freaks people out a little bit. Generally, when it comes to beer, infection is just something that gets into the beer and ferments it. That isn't what you intended it. An organism gets in there and ferments it in a way that you weren't intending, and usually it's just a flavour impact. It just makes the beer taste terrible, and that's usually what an infection is. The things like that can cause humans problems like, what are the bugs?
Salmonella or something.
Salmonella, exactly, thank you, and such. Yeah, they can't really survive in beer because of the alcohol and also the pH, I think, and hops.
The pH,
hops
the
provide
alcohol,
an antibacterial.
The process, which involves an hour-long boil, sorts it. There's pretty much nothing alive in that at the end of it. It's what might get in afterwards.
Yeah.
So if your process is good, you reduce the risk.
Yeah. So from the wort cooling down in the boil to between that phase from cooling the wort to getting it into the fermenter and pitching a yeast, that can be a bit of a trouble.
And in the fermenter too.
And in the fermenter, sure.
And bottling too. So on this one, don't shortcut it. I've had a lot of people ask me the question, do I need to sanitise my beer caps before I put them on the bottle? And a lot of people out there going, nah, of course you don't.
Yes.
But
the answer is yes.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, just a little jug.
Dump all those caps into a bowl of sanitizer, pull the cap out and put it on. In this instance, don't shortcut.
Yep.
Just
every step of the way.
Really not sure how this is going to work, so my advice is just be a little bit extra careful. Sanitise your bottles, sanitise your caps, give everything a little extra squirt with sanitizer to make sure that from your perspective, end to end, it's all as good as it possibly can be. And then the chances, because a bug has to get in there in order to infect it. If you make sure no bugs are in there, it's not going to be infected. Just, exercise a smidge extra caution. Don't take shortcuts on this one. Do this one properly.
Pop your bottles in the fridge. Well, I guess once they're carbonated, pop them in the fridge. Don't delay.
Yeah, once they're carbonated, just keep it in the fridge. Like I said, treat it like a fruit product. Treat them like they're cartons of milk, and you'll be all right. I think is the go. So maybe if you decide you like this, if you make one and it works, don't go making a 60 litre batch of it that's got to sit around for 3 months while you drink them. Just make 20 litre batches.
Make a smaller batch. Sure. That you can fit
that sort of thing. Unless you can keep 60 litres in the fridge. It's just something to be aware of. Have at the back of your mind.
Yeah. Michael again is. Michael's been very engaged today. Thanks, Michael. He was talking about Bitburger has a 0% beer, and he bought a 6-pack by mistake. And by the 5th beer, he sort of started to notice something was amiss, and then he looked at the bottle and realised it was 0 alcohol, but more or less it tasted the same as the standard one.
If you get 5 into you before you realise what's going on,
they've done something right.
Normally by 5 you wouldn't know what was going on anyway. So
well, exactly right. So why aren't I feeling a buzz yet?
This beer's defective. I'm sober.
So yeah, I mean, there are, you know, it has to be said that there's some good examples out there, and
because my fridge is now half full of non-alcoholic beers, I've pulled out the odd like macro lager and opened it and not realised that it was a non-alcoholic beer till I was halfway through it, sort of thing. Yeah,
I've tried a few. I tried the Heineken one, and I can't recall. There's another big, I think Heineken, and it escapes me. But anyway, I just because, you know, I mean, trying to. And they're available. It was pretty much the only one that I could find at that time, and it was all right. It was, you know, for a macro lager on a hot day, like I say, you have to sort of do the job. If you're really looking for, you know, if you're a designated driver or something, or you're just, you know, going with no alcohol for a while.
Yep. And I think that's where the no alcohol beer market is at the moment. Is the beers are all right.
Yeah.
I've not come across an excellent one yet. Sure. I've come across good for non-alcoholic.
Yeah.
If you were just judging it as a beer, you'd go, oh, it's all right.
Yeah.
But I think that's where the evolution, because there's a lot of people doing it now, and if homebrewers start doing it, that will help the craft evolve. Sorry, that's a bug. It's just my temperature.
Yeah.
People underestimate how much homebrewers can push product development in the brewing world, because homebrewers feed directly into craft brewers and craft brewers feed directly into the larger market. If homebrewers start doing this and getting good results, it's just going to take one craft brewer to taste some homebrewer's result and go, hang on a minute, that's better than mine.
Yeah.
And frequently homebrew is better than craft brew, because we aren't settled with commercial limitations.
Yeah, exactly. We have the freedom, some freedom.
So, you know, if we push the craft from this end and craft brewers push it from their end and the big brewers push it from their end, it won't be long before the products aren't just good for non-alcoholic beer, that they're just good.
Yeah.
They're already at that point where I'd rather drink a non-alcoholic beer than a soft drink. Mm-hmm. So I don't drink soft drink at all. If I want something at 10 in the morning, I'm happy to reach in the fridge and pull out a non-alcoholic beer.
Probably better for you, less sugar.
Yeah, there's not many calories in it. One of the reasons why my wife likes it. It's tasty. I'm a grown-up. I don't want a sweet syrupy thing. I don't much like drinking water. Yeah. So where I might have a tonic water before or a water with a squeeze of lemon juice or something like that, and I'll have a non-alcoholic beer now.
Yeah, cool.
Especially good for, you know, I've just finished doing some work, you know, that whole hard and thirst thing. That's fine if you didn't just finish doing that work at 9 o'clock in the morning and thinking to yourself, you know, maybe I really don't want to crunch back a full strength beer. Yeah. The non-alcoholics are great. A lot of places, especially in the States, are marketing them as sports drinks.
Of course, I see that because of all the nutrition and the salts.
They've looked at non-alcoholic beer and gone, that's virtually a sports drink. Let's just call it one. And then there's a few people one of the big US ones is Athletic Brewing, I think.
Okay.
And they are specifically marketing as sports drinks.
I
think they might be putting beer. I think they might be putting electrolytes and stuff into some if not all of their beers, specifically marketing it as sports beers, which isn't even new.
No.
Bicycle beers and Radlers and lawnmower beers and things from Europe. It's been a tradition to drink beer as sports drink for ages there. It's just that they'll mix it with a non-alcoholic thing or make a Berliner Weiss or something. Yeah. Drink it as a hydrating drink. But they're all low alcohol. So you extend that a smidge out to non-alcoholic. And you know, there's a big section there.
Yeah, I remember reading, it was one of those articles about, you know, how every week there's an article about how chocolate is good for you, and then the next week chocolate kills you. 1 week beer is good for you, the next week beer kills you. It was an article on saying that beer is good for, there was a study done, have no idea about the study itself, but apparently it helps people recover quicker from exercise. And it is a full strength beer. Oh,
that's right. And so if you take the only bad thing in the beer out, which is the booze,
the alcohol,
it is just going to be good for you.
Like I just see these during the London Marathon, or people handing out little cups of beer to the runners as they run past instead of water. Well, Oscars is showing up. Mid-conversation, he's like, what the hell are you talking about?
I went to Stone Brewing in the US, and the only merch I bought was, because at that stage, okay, I understand that it's not particularly credible at the moment, but at that stage I was jogging, prepping for a half marathon, the only t-shirt I bought was the one that said, I didn't run all this way for frickin' fizzy yellow beer. And that's the thing. If I come home from a run and I can like legitimately have a beer at the end of that and say I'm doing myself good,
who would have thought?
Then all I've got to do is convince myself to go running again.
Well, it could be a reward after
I'll call it an excuse. There's beer to come home to.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I run?
Go for a couple of Ks and then come home and have a beer, non-alcoholic beer.
All right.
Yeah. Sorry.
I might. So we're 40 odd minutes into the boil. So some of the things that I was going to do at the end of the boil, I might sort of do now and call it good enough.
Okay.
So I might take a boil pH, and I'll take a boil gravity now, and we'll call all those good enough for the end.
We'll pretend we're at the end of the boil.
And otherwise, it's just waiting for the
filling
boil
the time,
to finish and then
yeah.
do it at the end. So we'll speed this up. I'll do a couple of things now. And then at the end of it, you can watch me drain it into a cube and call it finished without having to muck about. I'll just get a pH meter.
All right, as you just step, I'll go off camera there. Oh, good. We're getting Radiant Penguin is posting some good sources for non-alcoholic beer. It looks like.
They're musicians, not brewers. Hello, the Peng. It's one of my wife's
You're acquainted?
Okay. One of my wife's bands is Radiant Penguin.
Oh, cool. She's a musician, is she?
Yes, Holly's a bass player.
Said that. Cool.
All right. So, one of the beautiful things about doing demos at the shop is that they've got this fancy digital refractometer, which I'm going to use. Is it temperature compensating? Can I just drop it in hot? Beautiful.
I didn't even know we had that.
Yeah. Actually, rather than just drop it in.
You can.
I'll show these guys a trick. I use these little plastic pipettes, and so you suck up a bit there. It'll squirt if you don't do this. So tip up like that. Get all the liquid down into the bulb there, and then run it under the tap for a few seconds.
Cool it down to room temp.
Then you get it cooled down so it works better on your refractometer, because all the refractometers tell you that they compensate for temperature, but then they give you a different reading if you put hot stuff on them than if you put cool stuff on them.
Yeah, so I believe the story with that is that they don't actually compensate, give you a different, compensate for the reading for the temperature. It just means that they can take the temperature, the measurement at a hotter temperature, so you've got to adjust it.
That cools just a few seconds under the tap or into a glass of water, cools that down enough so that it's essentially at body temp rather than at hot temp, so that's good. A couple of drops into the refractometer and read, and it tells me I have 4, I assume it's in Plato. 4 Plato would be 10-12.
I'll say yes.
Which would be kind of exactly what I was aiming for.
10-12, okay, cool. That's right on the money there. So yeah, you just put a little, I'll get a little close up there of the unit. So you put a little sample in the stainless little thing there.
In there, it's like got a little glass thing behind it where obviously the optics are.
Yeah, shines through and then it gives you the result. So
yep.
In Plato.
In Plato, this one, by the looks of it. Which is pretty standard for brewing gear.
Yeah.
But basically, degrees Plato or degrees bricks, you multiply that by 4 and it gives you the
Oh, that's simple, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a bathtub. It's not exactly 4.
Oh yeah, got it. Okay.
But you know, if you've got a 5 Plato beer, it's basically 10-20.
Okay. That's a good tip. I didn't know that one.
So yeah, 1050 beer is basically 4.8.
Right. Yeah. I've always avoided bricks and Plato just because my brain can only handle so much.
It's weird because most of the time I think about this sort of stuff in an analytical way. I'm in home brewer mode.
Yeah.
So I think in specific gravity, but at work all I use is Plato.
Everyone would use. Yeah. And why do you think that is? Why do homebrewers use specific gravity, and why is bricks and Plato?
I think it's just
in the
because
pro side.
Probably the first refractometers that came out that were available to homebrewers happened to be
in specific gravity. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but there's no reason to not use bricks or Plato. The pro brewing world uses Plato.
Yep.
But like I said, it's pretty easy. 4 is 10-12. So, and given that I was shooting for 10-12, I'm kind of happy with that. So there's obviously a bit in there that we missed. So maybe if we had used that sparge water, we might have got a smidge more.
Yep.
But it probably wouldn't have been too much because that was original and that was just sparge. So I'm going to say there wasn't, a great deal in there. So
maybe you don't think you would have extracted a lot from that sparge?
Maybe we would have got 10-15 if we'd have used that instead of water.
Yep.
But I'm reasonably pleased that we're on target with the gravity. So if we're starting at 10-12, that's off times where people finish their beers out.
Yeah.
So what's in there is essentially unfermented finished beer almost.
Okay.
So if you'd have started with 1050 and ended up at 1012, you've probably got what that fizzed up.
Yeah, would sort of taste like without the alcohol.
Without the alcohol.
Yeah.
So if we ferment out the bit of gravity that's in there, so it might be 1012 now, but you've got to think that 1012 that my beer would normally have done if we mashed it down includes a bunch of stuff that's just not fermentable. There's things contributing to that. There's dextrins, there's flavour compounds, all of that. They all contribute to the gravity of the beer.
Yeah.
So let's say half of that is fermentable sugars, and we ferment it down to 1006 or 006 from 1012. It's going to give us about 0.5%.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, maybe 0.6 or something like that.
Yeah, which is
so I think 1012 down to 1008 gives us exactly 0.5%.
Okay.
I did that on the back of the piece of paper at some point.
You're doing better than I ever would.
Close enough to 0.5%. If it goes a bit lower, it might be 0.6 or 0.7%.
And for not that it matters to us as home brewers, but is it anything over 0.5%?
0.5% makes it legally non-alcoholic. More than 0.5%, it's an alcoholic
beer. Alcoholic.
Yeah.
Right.
So in a certain tax range, I think once you get up to 2%, then you kick into proper booze range.
Okay. Yeah, got it.
It allows your toothpaste to have a bit of booze in it, but not be an alcoholic product. But it's officially not alcoholic if it's got less than 0.5%. A really ripe banana's got more than 0.5% alcohol.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
It is, for all intents and purposes, got no booze in it.
Yeah.
So I'm quite pleased with that result. I might take a quick pH sample just to see what's going on here. That's going to have to cool down. So just so you guys can see, what you can see is that it is really quite a clear wort at the moment with big ass chunks of break in it.
Yeah, I don't know if you can make out the chunks of break, guys, but it's definitely clear. You can see, okay.
Chunks of protein on the side of it, maybe.
Let's see if we can get the focus there. We'll see. When I upload the high def version, you'll probably be able to make it out later. So
it's pretty clear wort with lots of break.
Interesting. Okay.
Which is not bad at all.
So you'll probably wind up with after fermentation. You'll probably wind up with a lot of gunk and trub at the bottom.
Maybe not after fermentation, but I'll leave a lot of.
Or you'll leave it in the kettle. Okay.
All right. So that's. I'm just going to let that sit and cool before we take a pH of it, because the pH meter definitely doesn't like the high temps. So I've got a new pH meter, so I'm No, it's so new that I haven't put the batteries in it yet. So I might just default to the shop's pH meter, which I think there's one in the cupboard.
Yeah, actually, I can even grab that for you if you like, because I think I know where it is. I'll just leave the camera on you.
Excellent. Right, so we're 51 minutes through the boil, so we've only got a little bit to go before next steps. So we'll take this pH, and if it's high, I might drip a few drops of acid in it just to bring that pH down, because I really would like this post-boil pH to be about 5.1, 5.0. As we talked about before, it's because a bit of the food safety, and also because I think that will discourage the yeast from attenuating as fully as they possibly could. I don't know that the attention I'm paying to the attenuation of the yeast is going to make much difference, because I really think that whatever yeast I use is going to smash through whatever sugar is in there pretty effectively, no matter which yeast it is. But you never know. So let's play the cards as though it was going to make a difference, just in case it does. All right, so we've got ourselves a pH meter. Let's see what...
It's been calibrated, apparently. It's good to go. It's got a little...
Take the doover off.
Yep.
Actually, that's good, because I can just tip that in there. What's that got a... I won't do that then. That'll wreck that. So we've got 5.55, which is a bit high for a boil pH. So that means the mash pH was probably quite high. That's okay, that's what we're trying for.
That's what you wanted.
This is probably still a bit warm, so it might be a smidge less than that. 5.5. 5.51. Yeah, it's not changing a lot. So let's say it's in that range, so it's a tiny, tiny bit higher than I would like.
Yeah. So if you were concerned about infection, I believe the post-boil pH that's recommended is around 4.5 or below.
That's post-fermentation.
Oh, that's post-fermentation. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm
so
trying to recall these things off the top of my head.
Yeah, what's going to happen is you. So really, what happens is, like a general run-of-the-mill ordinary brew is going to be mashed somewhere 5.4 to 5.2.
Yes.
It's going to hit the kettle pre-boil at 5.4, 5.2, something like that. As you boil, the phytic acid's still going to start coming out, so that boil's going to drop.
Will drop as
Plus,
it boils.
generally, you're going to put some hop alpha acids in there. You're going to make acidic melanoidin products in the boil, so the pH drops across the boil, but usually only by 0.1 or 0.2.
Yeah.
So if you start at 5.2, you might end up at 5. If you start at 5.4, you might end up at 5.2. So 1 or 2 points of drop in a boil. When you pitch, the yeast don't like to be
too acidic
at that. So they've got a hydrogen pump in their cell walls. So basically the yeast's going to pump hydrogen cells out, hydrogen ions out into the liquid to bring the pH down, and the internal pH of the yeast goes up, because the yeast want to be at about 4.6, 4.8.
Right. Okay, and they do that as an evolutionary kind of thing.
The yeast alter their environment to make it what they like.
Yeah, make it what they like, and also to outcompete the other bacteria.
So other things don't like
it that low. Yeah.
Yep. So yeast want to be at that level, and they will work hard to make the environment at that level. And like a lot of things in brewing, really the precursor to good beer is to husband your yeast well. So we're as much yeast farmers as we are anything else.
Sure, yeah.
So if you make your yeast work too hard to alter their pH, then they maybe don't do such a good job of making nice flavours and converting sugar to alcohol as you want them to. So once again, it's be nice to yeast. If you give the yeast a nice environment, yeast will perform well for you, and you will get a better tasting beer. So in a general beer, you want to be shooting for a bit of a lower pH at the end of the boil, so the yeast haven't got so much work to do at the start of their fermentation, when they should be working hard to take up oxygen and nutrients and get ready for the job of converting the sugars to booze.
Yeah.
So
maybe 5.4. Maybe I had it around the wrong way.
Yeah,
5.4, or 5.2 to 5.4. So
yeah, so
post-boil,
5.2 is a pretty good post-boil.
Okay. 5.2. There you go.
Lower than 5.2 is quite low.
Yeah.
I'm going to shoot for a bit lower than 5.2. So do you know if we've got any phosphoric acid?
Oh yeah, I'm sure we do. I can.
Or lactic?
Lactic or phosphoric, one or the other. We'll go.
That would be great, and we'll just put a couple of drops in and see what we can do. And we've just basically hit our hour boils time. Actually what I might do is I'm going to stir in the Whirlpool hops now and see if that changes the pH a smidge, which it might. Give that a minute to rest, see what the pH is. Maybe put a couple of drops of phosphoric or lactic acid in. Give it a bit of a stir, see what that does. I'm not going to stress too much about this part of it. I'll give it a little try. If I can drop the pH, that's great. If I can't, it's something that I might pay attention to in the future. I could have acidified the the boil at the start of the boil when there was no time pressure on. And if you're at home, maybe have a think about it then. Drop the pH a smidge in your pre-boil wort, then your post-boil wort will be fine. And we've got some acid.
I couldn't find any package, so I got it straight from the source. Don't drink it.
Don't drink that. So which acid was it?
Phosphoric.
Phos. All right, cool. So what I've just told the guys that what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some hops in and see if that changes the pH a little before I muck about with the acid. Then if that doesn't drop the pH enough, then I'll put a little tiny bit of acid in. But I'm not going to work too hard on the acid here. I'm just going to get a cup, excuse me.
Yep, do your thing. So yeah, adding hops, that does lowers the pH. Or no, it raises the pH, does it?
It should lower it because you're putting alpha acids in.
Right.
But
I think it's post-fermentation then, because I know in sour beers it can raise the pH too. But I think that's dry.
That is about enzymatic action.
Right.
I believe.
Okay. So I'm just confusing things.
Not 100% sure about that. Don't hold me.
Okay.
Yeah, dry hop will raise pH.
Yeah, so dry hopping can raise, but bittering additions will lower. There you go. I'm just going to rinse my hands.
Sure.
I might have got a bit of that acid on my fingers.
Good idea. Right. I'm going for 20 grams, principally because Grain and Grape's hops come in 40 gram packets. You know what? The tear went away. There you go. There we go. Whirlpool hops, 20 grams. That's probably not enough. Just Whirlpool hops, 40 grams. There we go, easy.
Rook has made a comment. He'd like to know if this fermentation gets stuck. Do you think there's any risk of a stuck fermentation?
I think a stuck fermentation would be ideal.
Yeah, that's right.
If you can work out how we can make it happen, send through a message.
Yeah.
All right. I forgot. I had in fact originally calculated that recipe to put some hops in at the start of boil, and because I didn't do that, the 20 grams I was going to put in at Whirlpool, I've just turned into 40 grams at Whirlpool.
Oh, okay. So it might be a bit more bitter then.
Yeah. So I don't think we can. It'll be more bitter, but because it's just going to be at Whirlpool, hopefully we won't get too much bitterness out of them. A fair bit of this stuff, for you guys who aren't familiar with no chill, our alpha acids will dissolve in this, and they will carry across into the no-chill cube, and they'll continue to isomerise until the no-chill cube drops to 70. So we get a chunk more bitterness out of a Whirlpool edition than we would if we were rapidly chilling the wort.
Yes.
So my calculations for no-chill hops are pretty much add 15 minutes to the amount of time if you boil them. So if you put them in at 10 minutes from the end of the boil, calculate the bitterness as though you put them in at 25 minutes from the end of the boil. If you put them in the Whirlpool, calculate them as though they were 15-minute hops. That sort of thing. So now, 40 grams of Citra in at the start of the boil would make this beer massively bitter. 40 grams of Citra in at 15 minutes is probably going to be about right. Because it's not going to have a lot of grunt, this beer. So
you don't want it to be too bitter, it'll overpower. Yeah, you want it to be balanced. So for those of you who, using your brewing software, there you go, 15 minutes, add 15 minutes to you.
And that was me taking a quick look at the alpha going, oh crap, that's right, I didn't put any start of boil hops in it. I reckon if I chuck them all in, it'll be right. So it wasn't exactly a scientific process. So I'm going to give that a stir with my spoon.
The Whirlpool part.
Where did I put my spoon?
Do you have a paddle?
I put it somewhere. Ah, there it is. I put it there. I'm just going to give it a little stir for now, just to stir the hops up a smidge. When I do a Whirlpool, I like to turn the boil off, let the brew sit for 5 to 10 minutes, because you look at the thing even once you've turned the elements off and it's still swirling around, and all of that messes with the formation of the Whirlpool. So what I'll do is I will let it sit for a few minutes just to settle down till I look in there and I actually can't see things moving by itself anymore. So it'll start to clear out, and then counterintuitively, I stir it up again by doing a Whirlpool, pop the lid on it and give it 10 minutes, at which point we might, like while the Whirlpool's resting, we might just take a 5-minute break while it rests, because really there's nothing apart from us standing here waiting for the Whirlpool to settle, which doesn't really do much at all. So I've still got a bit of movement in there, so I'll let it sit. I like to do a Whirlpool with a lid on it, and not take the lid off until I'm pretty sure that the cone of trub is about to emerge from the top of the wort. I have to concede to Jeff that that's him. I always thought that was complete rubbish. And yet at demos time and time again, Jeff would get a good Whirlpool cone and I would just end up with sludge in the bottom of the kettle.
Yeah, okay. Because I've always had trouble with Whirlpools as well.
And he told me it's because I take the lid off.
It's so something about leaving the lid on.
Well, he reckons the temperature differential, there's enough temperature differential there so that the convection currents just pull the cone to pieces. Because if you put the lid on, all of that heats up and it stops convecting so much. I don't know if that's why it works, but my Whirlpools have been better since I've been putting the lid on and leaving it on.
All right, points for Jeff. So
I do now, points to Jeff, well played Jeff. And I hung shit on him about that. I hate that. All right, I'll dip out the little sample so we can take that post-boil pH. Might give it the stir for the Whirlpool. No, that's still going, but yeah, no, we'll give it the stir for the Whirlpool. Now, a lot of people think that you have to stir a Whirlpool, that the Whirlpooling process itself does something to the wort. It's not, it's when the Whirlpool's slowing down, that's when the stuff that's important is happening. So give your wort a stir, get it spinning, and stop. That's all that's required, just 20 or 30 seconds. It doesn't have to go that fast. Make the thing look like a Whirlpool, and then leave it alone.
But you don't really have to build a sweat or just like
No, you don't have to whirlpool it for 10 minutes or anything like that. Just that 30 seconds of spinning.
Yeah.
As long as the whole thing's spinning nicely and you see that there's a whirlpool,
yes.
you want to see that whirlpool.
You want to see that, yep.
For people who don't know, what happens in a whirlpool is we're attempting to make all the chunks in that pot settle to the bottom in a certain pattern. So when you spin wort in a pot, and if you try it at home with some loose tea leaves in a coffee cup, you'll see it. You'll see it happen. Give it a stir. As it spins like this, what happens is it's an interaction between friction from the liquid and the edge of the pot and the Coriolis force, and it sets up a countercurrent in the pot. So if you're looking through the pot sideways, so there's your pot and the wort's spinning in the pot like this, it sets up a countercurrent that goes like that.
Ah, yeah,
right? So it's all spinning this way, but it's also circulating like that.
Yeah.
And what that does is that takes chunks. Oh, I didn't put any brew bright in. I should put some brew bright in.
Oh yeah, brew bright, that'll help it settle, won't it? Is it too late to...
will I do that? No, sorry, it doesn't need it. Brew bright is a chemical agent that makes the chunks stick together in bigger lumps and fall to the bottom a bit faster. So it helps this process work a smidge more quickly. Anyway, so we're circulating like that. So that takes lumps and it drags them to the bottom, sweeps them across the bottom, and then tries to drag them up. But of course, dragging them to the bottom works with gravity, and dragging them up again works against gravity. So things settle out, but they settle out into a cone in the middle. So it sweeps them down, sweeps them into a cone in the middle. Some of them get dragged back up, but a lot of them stay there. And the cone itself is a tiny bit sticky, so things sweep past the cone and get stuck to it. So what we'll end up with in there, if things go right, sometimes it doesn't work, is all our stuff will settle to the bottom, but it'll settle to the bottom in a nice cone shape like that, which means that instead of pulling wort down to the level of the gunk and then leaving it behind, we can actually pull wort down to lower than the level of the gunk, and we'll get a bit more wort.
Squeeze a bit more out.
Squeeze a bit more of it out. And it just makes the thing settle out. Yeah. So we just let it sit, it'll settle down nice and evenly.
Yes.
The Whirlpool makes it happen a bit faster and gives us a nice shape that allows us to recover a bit more wort.
When we're transferring into the fermenter or the cube, and all that gunk you're talking about, it's like hot matter, proteins, it's just all stuff left over that gets kicked up in the boil.
Or in the boil, what we're doing is we're sterilising, but we're also boiling proteins out. We're extracting bitterness from hops. So everything that's in that kettle that we don't want in our final beer, if we do it right, we leave behind in the kettle now before we transfer it to a cube.
Take care of it now before getting into it. But it's not the end of the world. I mean, some people, depending on the gear you have at hand. I mean, doing a whirlpool at the very least is always a good technique, but some people may not have spigots on their pots or whatever, and I guess if you have to pour the whole thing into your fermenter,
look, you can. I think you get a general purpose better quality of beer if this stuff doesn't go into the fermenter.
Generally try and avoid it.
So we talked about the difference between hot break and cold break before. Hot break can adversely affect the quality of your final beer.
Hot break. Yep.
Cold break won't. So the stuff in the kettle, avoid if you can.
Right.
If you can't, don't cry about it. So it's not going to ruin the beer, but it might affect its quality slightly. So it's one of those things. If you get everything right, you'll get a great beer. Leaving as much of this out of the cube as you can is getting it right.
Got it.
All right. Now, a little bit of cold water in that.
So you're dunking your hot sample in a bit of cold water just to try and chill it down a little.
Just to take a bit of the edge off the heat. And when you do
more
that,
efficiently.
It's one of those things where a little bit of agitation, a little bit of this will cool it a lot faster. Already at the point I can stick a finger in it without fearing for my finger, so it's probably good enough to give me an idea of where we are. See if it's better than the 5 point 5.5 we had before. It's looking like we might settle back in just about that same pH level. Yeah, so it's settled in, so the hops haven't really made much difference. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to get too scientific about it. I'm going to, sorry, I'm not talking to the camera, excuse me. I'm not going to get too scientific about it or worry about it too much. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put 3 drops of the acid into there and take what that gives me.
Okay.
We'll measure it again afterwards, but I'm not going to.
You're not
it's going to take too long to ticky-tack backwards and forwards, cooling samples and adjusting pHs as I go. So it gets 3 drops and we'll see how that goes.
And whatever comes out of it, whatever happens, happens.
Yep. Still moving around a little bit in there, that wort, so that should mix itself in. We'll put this acid down the sink nice and safely. Yeah, so maybe if I was doing this at home, you know, I had all day to do it and I wasn't trying not to bore senseless a whole bunch of people at the other end of the internet, I would muck about and tweak this pH. But as it is, it was a little high. I put a few drops of acid in that. Hopefully that makes it a bit better. We'll see where it ends up. If it's like still really high, maybe I'll put another couple of drops in the cube. And we'll call that good enough. Cool. So I will take another pH as we fill the cube up, probably just from whatever's left in the kettle after we fill the cube up. If it's still high, a few drops into the cube, scrunch the cube shut.
We'll
see how it goes.
Yeah. These are the things you can do when you've got a bit of experience under your belt. You can kind of wing it to a degree.
Well, you sort of know where the spots to interfere are.
Yeah.
And also, you know, with an experimental beer, it's not a tragedy if it doesn't work. That's one of the things I get with beginners is they're terrified that it's not going to work. It's got to be a success or it's a tragedy. It's not. All your mistakes are a learning experience too. It's not very often that people make undrinkably bad beer.
Yeah, you'll definitely make beer.
If you've not got an infection, it's almost certainly going to be drinkable beer. Might not be what you wanted, but it'll be all right.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're trying something out, give it a go. Go, oh, that didn't work the way I wanted it to. Remember what you did so you don't do it again next time, and just get on with your day.
Take notes is always been my advice. If you're a beginner, or take notes and be analytical but not too critical of yourself. You know, don't be too hard on yourself.
No, I mean a lot of the time these demos are. This one probably isn't, but a lot of the time these demos are pitched at beginners, and beginners just need to relax.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I know I did it. I spent months building my brewery before I ever brewed on it because it needed to be right.
Same, yep.
But at the end of the day, I saw someone brewing perfectly good beer in a plastic bucket. Oh, all right then. You know, you come here and you watch somebody who's experienced and is winning awards at competitions left and right, doing it in a bucket and an old sock, and you go, okay, so it's not about the gear then, it's kind of about what you know.
Yeah.
All right, so if we've Whirlpooled there, what we might do is we might give that break, that'll give me a chance to get my cube, sanitise my cube, find a bit of hose, because I haven't got one of those, and we'll come back in 5.
Yep.
And we'll look at draining this into a cube and finishing up.
That'll be it. Okay, cool. All right, everyone. Take 5, and we will be right back. Here. All right, we're back.
All right, we're back. Okay, so while we've been away, I've just done a little bit of prep for getting this ready to transfer to a no-chill cube. So you can see that I've attached a hose to the boil kettle. So this crown urn has had an aftermarket spigot put on it, which makes life a lot easier. I have one at home with the original tap on it, and you can, if you try hard enough, jam a piece of hose onto the end of it. This just makes life easier.
And I see you've just looped it around and stuck it on the handle there.
Yep, so that's my trick. So this hose has been sanitised inside and out, and I don't want it touching things. So it is actually leaning up against the table there, but I sanitise the table, and that's my trick. So I sanitise it inside and out, sanitise the handle, squish it on the handle, and then it doesn't touch anything until such times as I want to use it.
It's all sanitised and
although everything that's happening here is happening at hot temperatures, pasteurisation plus temperatures, because I've just made a bunch of bacteria food, and I'm going to leave this sit in a corner for God knows how long. I want to make sure it's belts and braces as far as I'm concerned, which is why this cube has been sanitised. I've put a bit of Stelasan in here, which is Starsan equivalent no-rinse sanitizer, a phosphoric acid-based sanitizer, just a teeny tiny bit. I've coated the inside of this with that. I'm going to give whatever bits of the lid didn't get a sanitizer sanitise all the...
Always good to have a spray bottle of sanitizer handy.
Yes,
if for anyone who's a beginner, just make up a spray bottle before on brew day, and fresh batch is always best.
The answer is yes. If in doubt whether you should sanitise it or not, yes.
Definitely.
That's how hard it is, so why wouldn't
Why not?
Everything. Definitely. And just I just wander around spritzing the universe with this stuff when I'm doing transfers.
Especially at the moment.
So, hands included. When I'm going to handle this hose, I'll spray my hands. If my hands are covered in sanitizer, then I can't infect it with my hand goop. So I wash my hands, of course, so they're clean, but always, everything gets a bit of a spritz. If it's wet with sanitizer, it can't infect anything.
Yeah, and it's pretty mild for anyone wondering on the skin.
Look, I find that it dries my hands out a bit.
It does dry your hands out.
So after my brew day, I'll wash my hands and I'll rub some moisturiser into them because it dries them out a bit. But it's not enough to burn you or hurt you. Yeah. It's enough to destroy bacteria, not people.
Not skin.
That tastes really gross.
Now, you can see there, it's pretty empty. This stuff froths up a fair bit. If you get if you've put more, I put like a splash in there, just enough to coat the inside. If you put more than that and you get a bunch of foam in there, just like turn it upside down, knock a bit of it out. Whatever's clinging to the side, that's fine. It won't affect the beer.
Don't worry about the foam.
It just breaks down and turns into flavourless compounds, harmless flavourless compounds. So, if you looked in here closely, you would see there's a little bit of foam in there.
I find it just comes out the top anyway when it fills up.
It tends to float on top of the wort and
push
comes
out
out.
the lid.
So this is probably whirlpooled for long enough, sat for long enough. At home, plenty of time. I walk away from a whirlpool for half an hour and come back and it's beautiful. 15 minutes is enough. This is enough. It just depends. Like I said, I'm an old-fashioned brewer. I like clear things, so I walk away from a whirlpool for half an hour and beautiful clear wort comes out. And I don't get any gunge. Depends how much patience you've got. All right, so once again, I'm going to sanitise a little, sanitise me. Put that hose in all the way to the bottom. So now you're going to get a little bit of no-chill whirlpool drainage tricks. So you want a hose preferably about this long. So you want it to reach all the way to the bottom at least, because they're not splashing. So you want to minimise that oxygen. Minimise the oxygen pickup in the hot wort. That's a good thing for brewing quality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this up so I create a bit of an airlock. I'm going to open the kettle valve here, squeeze all the little bubbles out of there. So once I've filled this up, I'm just going to gently lower it down, and then that will fill slowly up with wort without ever having broken a siphon. Now, so it's just going to suck a little bit through there. All right, now that's slowly starting to fill. I just let it get started so that I'm sure that I'm liquid from top to bottom.
Okay.
Then I can't pull a bubble and it won't stop no matter how much. If you have bubbles in there and you slow the flow down too much, then the bubbles will all rise up and your siphon will stop and you just won't flow.
Yeah.
Right? But once you've started to go a bit, then I like to back the flow rate off a smidge so that I don't pull any stuff from my Whirlpool out.
So very gently.
Gently. I transfer my no-chill cubes slowly.
Mm-hmm. Yep, put the cap on there.
That's just to stop anything falling in.
Yep.
Right, so you can see how slowly I'm transferring.
Yeah.
I'll just have a look, make sure I'm not transferring too slowly. I mean, it's hard to tell what your flow rate is. It's climbing up slowly.
It's coming through.
So what I'll do is I'll transfer slowly until I've got a quarter of a cube. Then I'll open the valve up a bit more, transfer out until I think that maybe I've got to the top of my cone of gup.
Yep.
Then I'll back the speed off a whole bunch again, open up my vessel and have a look. And then I'll keep going slowly until I start to pull sludge through or until my cube's full, whichever comes first.
So you've still got the lid on the urn at this point, or
yep.
you know.
So I haven't seen what's going on there.
It's all a mystery. It's Schrodinger's wort at the moment.
That's right. So there could well be a dead cat in there. But I've done this enough times now that I'm pretty confident about what's going on in there.
I guess this is also where your water calculations come in handy at the beginning. We'll probably do a show on water calculations at some point. Yeah. We do have an article on our website about those, but getting your water calculations right, I'm just getting advice for, I'll just pop on screen here too, so I'm not just this voice. Getting all that stuff dialed in before you brew, that allows you to estimate where you're going to end up at the end, so you know, having done all this already, that pretty much what you're going to wind up with is the exact amount of work.
They're pretty close to full.
The
variation will be how much trouble I've made, how much muck I've left. Now, if for some reason this is a particularly mucky beer, which is possible, I might have to pull up before I get a full cube's worth.
Okay.
And that's going to be the little bit of experience making a beer type. If I put heaps and heaps of hops in there, then I'm going to make a bit more muck.
Yeah.
And I might want to add, make a litre of extra so that I can leave that behind. Excuse me. All right, I've got enough in there now that I'm confident to speed things up a little so that we're not here all day watching that transfer. I never really open it all the way up. I know some people just smash it in there, and that still leaves the vast majority of the gup in the kettle. So if you're really impatient, you can pretty much throw it in there and you'll still leave 80% of the goo in the kettle. But I've worked hard getting this right, so I try to do it right.
Yeah.
And those of you out there who counterflow chill your wort will be looking at it about now going, that's about how fast I run it through my chiller. This might be a waste of time. So that's in fact true. If you counterflow chill, you can probably get this step done and chilled wort as fast as I'm filling this cube up.
Yeah, right.
You guys want saisons?
Saisons? You got some saisons are out there. Okay.
Saisons are out there.
Right.
There's saison going on. Have one.
We've just been offered some saisons.
Awesome. That's one of the perks of doing your weekend's job in a home brew.
Yeah, it certainly is.
So 4.5 saison, pitched with bell saison, French saison, and the Ardennes as well.
This is just Finn off camera for anyone. This is one you made. This is your Solera project.
Ooh. So it's a saison that I continuously repitched on top of, and then added different yeast strains to it.
Oh, as it went. That sounds great.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
And the latest one I'm going to do is going to be a cherry style saison, and depending on whether or not I like it enough, it'll go on top of the rest.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, it does sound good.
I played a little Solera with a sour beer thing in a barrel I had, and that was fun for a couple of years.
Yeah, I've played around with it too. I think there's a show in that.
Yeah,
Solera Brewing. Ah, thank you. So, hand delivered.
Oh, sweet. I shall approach the camera to get my beer. Thank you. Oh, that's pretty.
got mine. I'll take my mask off here.
Bit on now.
Ah,
It does smells great. It tastes great too.
it's got like a lemony sort of a.
Yep, that's the French.
Real
going
lemon
on.
droppy thing going on. Like a bit of woody, like
That's nice.
pithy,
Yeah.
pithy herbal woody
Yep,
thing going on.
So on the most recent one, I zested Valencia orange into it at flame out.
Oh, so this has got
Oh, there we go.
orange in there as well. Orange
So it turns out
Zest.
my water calcs weren't that great.
weren't that great. Okay,
I've hit the level of the thing already, about
What's that ABV on?
thirds of the way.
so
It's
you've.
just a bit of a beer appreciation club going on at the moment, which is great.
I hope everyone is enjoying watching us drink beer.
Well, they're all at home; they can drink beer too.
Yeah, we can drink along with this.
That's really good.
Yeah, good work, Finn.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have got a nice
Behind the scenes
whirlpool.
there.
I've got a nice whirlpool and a nice cone, and reasonably clear word at the edges. I don't know if you want to try and have a look in.
Yeah, all
Go
right.
with that.
Let's try and get some.
Make the poor bugger move his camera. All this work to
I'll,
get it set up, and I make him pick it up and drag it around the shop.
I'll get my cabling.
Do you want me to hold on to that while you point a camera?
Yeah, perhaps.
All right.
I've got a bit of a knot in here, unfortunately. I'll do that.
Technical
So if
bits.
you want to just
Hold that so you don't
hello,
drag the PC.
yeah, hold that so I don't drag the whole computer off. All right, everyone, we're going on an adventure. Here we go. How are we doing back there?
Yeah, plenty.
Good, plenty of room. All right. So, oh yeah, okay, good. So I hope everyone can see what's going on in there. So that is said cone. It's probably a bit dark to fully see. I'll just pull out. But yeah, you can sort of see the ring of wort around the outside, and in the middle you got this nice cone of hop matter and trub or trub. Is it trub? Is that how you pronounce it?
Oh, it
Or
depends
is
how
it
fussy you're being.
Dep-
I'm alternating.
It's a German. Is it a German word? I think it's German.
Yeah.
Anyway, I hope you all get the idea. So yeah, that's what you want. That's a sign of a successful whirlpool.
There you go, we'll duck back across. So the whirlpool was a success, the volume calculations less so, but that's okay, because like we said before,
Sorry, here we go.
There you
Locked
go.
in.
like we said before, the point of the whirlpool is that I've got a bit more clear word around the edges, even though I've reached the top of the level of stuff that would otherwise come around. So I can actually, if I'm a bit careful about it, I can tilt this up and get a bit more out. So I'll probably get another inch or two in the cube there, and I'll call that good enough. Right, I got the volumes wrong, doesn't matter. I made a bit less than I planned to. So next time I'll put a bit more starter in, and it'll be fine. So I started with whatever was in the bucket that drained out of the no chill bag, and I added it to 13 litres of water. So next time what I'll probably do is add it to 15 litres of water, and then we'll be right, you know. So open this up. Oh, might tilt it
So
first.
now you've got to tilt, yeah, and that will.
That cone of stuff you've seen in the middle
Stay.
there is a bit jelly-like. It sort of wobbles rather than falling to pieces.
Yeah.
So if you take it nice and slow, it'll just wobble in place in the middle and sink slowly rather than sucking all the way down there. And if I go too fast, I'll break chunks off of it. And that's going to happen, but I won't panic unless I start to get a heap of it in there. And the wet's a little cloudy, but it's not bad.
Saisons for years.
Yeah.
I
good
eventually
work.
Get like a wine barrel.
Yeah, cool.
like a Chardonnay or something, and
Like a full, like a
250 litre.
wow. He's keen.
That's fair.
Big can of mine.
Yeah, cool. Well, it's, I mean, yeah, top beer. You're doing something right.
They're easy to over oak, so get like a one that's reasonable age, that's been going for a couple of years, that's probably spent from a winemaker's perspective.
I'm going to run a fair few through it before I actually start putting Soleras in there.
Yeah, so some clean beers.
Yeah,
And
probably
then,
like some blondes and that sort of stuff that I might eventually like sour and put some fruits in. I'm growing some Fahoa trees and a pomegranate. And I'm going to get the cherry trees, so I'll probably do some blends with those when they start fruiting.
yeah.
Got some loganberries growing as well as some raspberries,
So you'll
endless opportunity for sours.
basically, so you'll wind up with like a fodor, how do you pronounce it?
Fodder.
Fodor.
That's how I read it.
Yeah, fodor.
I'd love to
Or
have
fodor.
one of those, but I don't
Fodor.
think it's going to fit in my single story house.
No, those barrels are big.
Oh yeah, they're huge. Sorry, I'll leave you to it.
That worked really well. So basically my cone, because you probably saw when we pointed the camera into the boil earlier on, the flocks of protein were quite big, and I think that's because there was a bit of stuff in the wort. But because we converted all the starch, it wasn't floury stuff. I think it was just a bit. So what I've noticed, this wort's quite grainy. So
Yeah,
it's not fluffy, the troop.
Interesting.
And what it's done is it's settled down into a really nice jelly blob in the middle, and there wasn't much loose at all. So I've actually managed to tip out all but probably a cup of the liquid that was in there.
Okay, so you pretty much got everything.
I've
Yeah,
pretty
then
much
you're
got
left with
everything
all the
that's
solid matter
left to offer in there. I can and will.
Cool.
come
So you've
and
just
use
loosely put the cap back on the cube there to stop anything falling in.
Yep, just to stop everything falling in. I'm going to bring this to you this time, so you don't have to drag the camera across,
okay,
so you can have a bit of a peer in there.
Yeah, cool. Yep.
Can you see?
You might, if you want to put it down and just tilt it towards me, if it's not too hot. Will it mess up everything if
No, you can.
if
you
you
can
keep
see.
tilting? There you go, everyone. I think you can.
There you go. So there's a few cups of liquid left that's pretty mucky, and a good solid
See that lump in the middle
lump
there.
in the middle,
That's
which
a
is
good job.
the majority of it. And so what I tipped out, I mean, I just stirred it up a bit doing that.
Yep.
So I pretty much stopped when I started sucking any of the goo in. So what's gone in here is pretty clear. So I'll
Pretty
just
clear. So
Let's
lift
buy
it.
a couple of litres.
Yep. So your hop breaks. That's all your hop break.
Yep.
Well, part of it's hop break, some of it's hops stuff. And yeah, so now you've got a cube that is, you've got a bit of airspace in the top
I've
there.
got some airspace, so I will squish that and get as much of that air out as I can. I shall find, if I possibly can, a tea towel or something so I don't burn my knee doing
That
it.
is a important
Important part of cube squishing
thing
is
to
the
remember
tea
is
towel.
that cubes will be hot.
So I'm just going to duck
they're
off
supposed
camera
to
for
be.
a second and find myself a towel.
No worries. I'll just, I'll stay here and talk to myself.
There was one handily there, so that's good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just give everything a last squirt with sanitizer. So everything's sanitized. Now, if you left that, it wouldn't be a tragedy because most of what's in there is steam vapor. There's some oxygen. When it cools down, it will suck in a fair bit of the air that's in there because that's going to cool down. Plus, it will dissolve a bit of oxygen. Excuse me, because when you boil wort, you drive off all the dissolved gases. So what will happen is it'll cool down, the airspace will cool down and contract, then what's in the airspace will dissolve into the wort because it's got nothing dissolved in it at the moment. So that's actually one of the reasons why you want to squeeze it out, because the bit you don't want dissolving into your wort is the oxygen.
And that'll give you a hot side aeration. Would that be called hot side aeration at this point? Because
mash, hot wort aeration,
hot
whatever you
cube
want.
aeration.
Hot cube aeration. Basically what's going to happen with that, it's not a massive drama. You need a lot of hot side aeration to wreck your beer, but what it does is it makes it age a little less gracefully. So one of the things that makes beer age is oxidation. the things that stop it from being oxidised are antioxidants in the beer. If those are in your beer as it ages, the antioxidants use up the oxygen, your beer doesn't go stale. If I've introduced a bunch of oxygen here, I've used up some of the antioxidants that should be in my beer later, protecting it from aging.
Yeah.
So it just makes your beer age a smidge less gracefully.
Yeah.
It's not massive. If you can't fix this, don't worry about it.
Not worth stressing over, but
if you can fix this, fix it as much
well.
as you can, which is what I'm going to do. I probably won't be able to squeeze all that out, but I'll have a go. So I'm going to probably do it
find
here, 'cause that's
a
something
solid,
else that's
sturdy surface.
Yep. This is the way. Give yourself a bit of heat protection. So screw that on until it's just slightly finger tight. Tilt yourself backwards so all the air's at the top. Put a knee into it.
Squeeze. And yeah, you got a bit of work to do there, I'd say, with all that space.
So like I said, it's a lot of head space. So I'm not going to go crazy.
Yeah, you're probably not going to
Risk
get all of
burning
it out.
myself to get all of that out of there. But I've squeezed the majority of it.
Yep. So even that amount of oxygen, that amount of air, it's not worth fretting over, I guess.
It's like, once again, if I could have gotten it out
Yeah.
without a problem. The other thing I could do is, because the thing I was missing, I could go boil the kettle and pour boiling water in there.
Oh, just top it up, yeah, okay.
And just top it up.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, because what I missed was the amount of water I put in. So adding water at this stage is no different from having added it before. So I could have done that too, and that would get me up to the top there. But it's not so great a drama that you really need to worry about it that much.
All right, good to know.
So give it a good scrunch on. Give everything a bit of a squirt down with sanitizer, and make sure you sort of get a bit up into the
threads.
Things. That's especially true if you did a successful squeeze there and a bit of work came out. So you want to rinse that out so it doesn't go mouldy, sitting there waiting, because it's not on the inside of the cube, but then the minute you open the cube, you've opened your wort up to a little ring of mould around the edge. So just give it a bit of a wash off. And that, most of that air will be gone by the time this cube cools down.
Yeah, because it'll shrink as it cools, contract.
If I had hops in there, to make sure I got reasonable value out of my hops, what I would do is every 15 minutes for the next hour or so, I might come out and roll that cube around, just to mix the hops up a bit to get all the value out of them. But in the meantime, because there's no hops in this, that will be fine. That goes into the corner of the garage. It cools down overnight, and then we put some yeast into it. Now, speaking of yeast, we've got that one. That is, we were talking about perhaps using a Nipah yeast.
Yeah.
So this is a dry Nipah yeast. And in order to get my yeast to do a bit of work and produce the esters that they're going to produce, I'm only going to pitch a quarter of a pack.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay.
So that's enough. That's enough yeast to ferment 25 litres of normal strength Nipah.
Yeah.
So it's way in excess of the yeast that's needed. So that would smash through that in a couple of hours probably.
Yeah.
It wouldn't need to reproduce. It'll just go straight into fermentation mode and go bang. So I'm going to only pitch a quarter or maybe even a little less of this yeast. So it has to maybe reproduce at least once. And that's going to make it do a little bit of work, do a bit of fermentation, do a reproduction cycle, push out some flavours. Hopefully. So
that's the theory. Yep.
We've actually got our finished product. We've got the yeast that we're going to put on our finished product. There's nothing really else to put in there. I didn't do the final pH. I've got enough in there to do it. Maybe later. I won't do it on camera now.
Yep.
Maybe later I'll take some of this trub and I'll filter it through a sock and get half a cup of clear wort out. I'll test its pH. Hopefully it's low enough. If it's not, I might I'll adjust the pH after I open the cube in when I'm going to pitch.
You can always do that.
That's right, because I've got another opportunity. When this is cool and I'm ready to pitch, I can tweak it then.
Yep.
I could open the cube anywhere before it was at about 70 degrees Celsius. So when it's still safe, but I don't like to do that. I like to keep mine closed. A lot of people do. Some people who put hops into the cube don't like to put them into the cube until the wort's at 70 degrees or below, because they want the aroma compounds out of those hops. They don't want any bitterness. And iso-alpha acids stop isomerizing at about 70 degrees Celsius. So if they put hops in when it's at 68 degrees Celsius, they'll still dissolve all the aroma compounds, but they won't get any bitterness.
Yeah.
Anything that goes in there now, I'll get a decent whack of bitterness out of.
Sure.
Just on recap, we used the one recipe to rule them all, which is a jack of all trades recipe that can be nudged in any direction. We're making it as an American Pale Ale today, so it's in its original format, the details of which will probably go up on the website a bit later. So if you come back and look at this later, there'll be some written information to accompany what we've done today. But it's basically a golden to maybe very pale amber, highly malt backbone driven wort. We have cold mashed it to avoid making sugars. So we mashed the beer in cold, steeped it overnight in the fridge cold. We lauded it cold, and at no point did the beer get warm enough to gelatinise the starch or activate the enzymes. Once we had nothing but clear wort, we put the small amount of wort, which was about 10 or 12 litres, into a roughly equivalent volume of boiling water to rapidly bring the temperature up to a high saccharification temperature of about 70 plus degrees. That converted any starch that did get in there into long chain dextrins, which are unfermentable, to give us once again an unfermentable wort, so no alcohol production. We boiled that like a normal beer. We added a fair amount of calcium for mouthfeel. Hopefully there's plenty of protein in there, because at no point did we do a protein rest or would go through the protein rest parts of a mash. We added some citra right at the end to give it a nice juicy hoppy mouthfeel with a lightish bitterness. We're going to ferment it with a Napa yeast once again to hopefully give us some nice mouthfeel. We added a bunch of calcium chloride to the boil to help with a nice mouthfeel and palate weight. The whole object of the game is to brew a tasty, no alcohol beer with reasonable palate weight and mouthfeel and a nice malt backbone and bit of flavour from yeast and a good hoppy backbone as well. That part of it we don't know. I know that we hit our target. We were shooting for about 10-12. About 10 minutes before the end of the boil, we hit 10-12 or 4 Plato, so we're probably at about 10-13 maybe now. So I think we more or less hit the targets we wanted to hit. We did everything we wanted to do within reason that I remembered to do while we were standing around here. And I think it's probably going to ferment out okay. It smelled really nice. So it smelled malty and good in the kettle. Once we put hops in, it smelled malty and good and hoppy in the kettle. We'll see how it turns out once it's been fermented. We'll update the video once it's been through the ringer of Grain and Grape tasters.
I definitely look forward to trying it. Awesome. Well, do you think that feels pretty comprehensive? Are you happy with
I think we've done it. Unless you guys really want to watch me wash all this stuff out. We're up to the final bit of home brewing, which is clean up your mess.
Yeah. The main part of home brewing, in a way, is cleaning. Brewing is cleaning, is one of the sayings. All right. Well, that was great. I learned a lot. Cool. I hope everyone out there found that interesting. Low alcohol beers, no alcohol beers, certainly a topic that is very hot right now. Keep an eye on our channel. If you want to be advised of any new videos we upload, subscribing is a good way to do that. Yeah, keep an eye out in the description for links for anything that Dan mentioned in the show. We'll try and get those uploaded in the coming weeks.
Hopefully one of these days, not too soon, we'll all be allowed to come back and do live demos in the shop again.
Yeah, in the shop, yeah. We'll keep everyone posted. The newsletter is a good way to keep apprised of any of those developments too. On our website, if you subscribe to that, it's a good way of staying up to date with the news and gossip that happens around the store, or our Facebook page too. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Dan. That was
My
great.
pleasure. It's always great.
Yeah, and thanks to everyone who commented in the chat too. There was some good, lots of good advice, and some good sources for alcohol-free beers too. Radiant Penguin, a little shout out to you there, and everyone else who commented too. Cool. All right, everyone, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.